Chapter 3865. At the same time that Linny was in a daze, Yuzha was also in a daze. In the instant that the door opened, this Linny really did look a bit similar to the Lin second in his memories. However, the similarity was only in his stature and temperament. His face was completely different. After staring blankly for a moment, the two of them came to their senses at the same time. Lin Yi immediately said warily, "What business do you have with me?" Lin Yi purposefully asked in a very vague manner. He wanted to test whether or not the other party had seen through his identity. Also, what was he planning by suddenly appearing here today? Yuzha sized up Lin Yi. Just now, in his daze, Lin Yi did look a bit similar to the Lin second he was looking for. This discovery made him overjoyed. But now that he was staring at this completely different face, the more he looked, the more he felt that it didn't look the same. This made him rather confused. Could it be that because he had been too excited just now, it was all just an illusion? Yuzha felt a bit disappointed. But whether or not it was true, just looking wasn't enough. He had to see the results of his test. "Come with me. If you don't want to come, you can try," Yuzha said in a low voice, then turned and left. Lin Yi couldn't help but frown. This guy was just as he remembered. He really was crafty and difficult to deal with. He had wanted to test him, but he had thrown out such a brainless sentence. He couldn't get any useful information out of him. But why did this feel a bit like the situation in a school in the mortal world, where the senior students would call out the junior students to teach them a lesson? Looking at Yuzha's back, Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. He followed without hesitation. It didn't matter if the other recognized him or not. Facing a mere Yuzha, there was nothing to be afraid of. For the sake of the star ink stone, it wasn't just Yuzha who had racked his brains to find him. How could Lin Yi not want to find a chance to silence him? Even though it seemed a bit risky. But there was no reason for Lin Yi to let go of an opportunity that had been delivered to his doorstep. He still had a fatal weakness in his hands. Not to mention the fact that Yuzha was alone. Even if he called the Southern Heavenly Gate over and used this weakness at a critical moment, he would definitely be able to protect himself. Silently following behind Yuzha, the two of them walked for 2 miles. They walked to the foot of the mountain where the other rookies would not notice for a short period of time before stopping. "You can tell me now, can you? What do you need from me?" Lin Yi looked a little nervous. Of course, this was all an act. On the surface, he was just an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator at the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Suddenly being called out by Yuzha for no rhyme or reason, it would be abnormal if he wasn't nervous at all. "What is it? Don't you know what you've done?" Yuzha laughed coldly. He knew that the Southern Heavenly Gate was definitely watching from the side, so he didn't dare mention the word Star Inkstone at all. He might as well use words to trick Lin Yi. What did I do?" Lin Yi's face was full of confusion. Then, as if he had suddenly realized something, he said, "Could it be that you were called over by Meng Jueguang to deal with me? Last time Yuzha had appeared with Su Lingchong and the others." This was something that anyone could see. So when Lin Yi asked this question from the perspective of a normal Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomer, it wasn't out of place at all. "Meng Jueguang? What kind of nonsense is that?" Yuzha was instantly stunned. He didn't know about the conflict between Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang, but last time when Meng Jueguang introduced Lin Yi to him, he really didn't say anything nice. The two sides didn't get along. This was something that was obvious. Come to think of it, Yuzha was a dignified inner sect disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion. Moreover, he was a middle-stage foundation establishment expert. That Meng Jueguang was only a new manager from Blue Cloud Pavilion. What ability did he have to trouble Yuzha to personally help him? "Didn't Meng Jueguang ask you to come? Then why did you call me out?" Lin Yi pretended to be surprised. Asked by Lin Yi. Yuzha was a little hesitant. If he had been able to use his words to trick the other party into revealing some clues, he would not have felt any psychological pressure. However, judging from the other party's reaction, there were no flaws. He was just an ordinary Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomer. This was going to be difficult. After all, from Yuzha's point of view, even if what Kang Mingming said was true, even if this Lin Yi was really an alchemist and knew how to make the pill fire bomb, the possibility of this guy being Lin Air was already very small. For this small possibility, was it worth it to take such a huge risk and attack a newcomer from Welcoming Sky Pavilion? As Yuzha was hesitating, the South Heaven Gate's voice suddenly appeared in his ears. "Tell the kid that you're going to kill him. Then don't waste your time talking to him. Attack him right away and watch his reaction carefully." Yuzha was shocked and subconsciously looked around. After he came back to his senses, he forcefully restrained this impulse. The Southern Heavenly Gate was not in his line of sight. The reason why he could hear this sound was because he had used the thousandly true chi technique. Of course, although it was said to be 1,000 li, the actual effect could not be so exaggerated. However, a few li was not a problem. Also, this technique had an advantage. After locking onto the target, only the target could hear the sound, but the surrounding people would not hear it, even if they were less than 3 meters away from the target. However, Southern Sky Gate had forgotten one thing. Even if Lin Yi could not hear the words he transmitted to Yuzha, with the distance between Lin Yi and Yuzha, Lin Yi's perceptive ability could more or less detect a trace of a ripple. Of course, it could not be said that he had forgotten. A normal cultivator's perceptive ability would not be as strong as Lin Yi's. Furthermore, Yuzha's subconscious reaction of turning his head was already an absolute flaw in Lin Yi's eyes. It was just enough to prove it with the strange ripple that he had just captured. As expected, there was someone else. Lin Yi instantly made a judgment. It was very easy to determine that this person was most likely the second of the 3 Nen brothers mentioned in Shangguan Laner's letter, Southern Sky Gate. When he first saw Yuzha, Lin Yi had this suspicion. After all, Yuzha was only a middle-stage Foundation establishment inner disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion. It was very suspicious that he dared to cause trouble for a newcomer from Welcoming Sky Pavilion in broad daylight. However, if there was a Southern Sky Gate behind him, then it would not be strange at all. Chapter 3866. As he finished speaking, Yuzha didn't give Lin Yi any chance to react. Sword Chi instantly gathered in his hand and he used the 21st form of the fatal consecutive sword. To a normal early-stage Foundation establishment expert, this move was enough to kill him. Lin Yi was shocked. Although he had sensed the existence of the Southern Sky Gate, he had no idea what the Southern Sky Gate had said to Yuzha. Who knew that Yuzha would suddenly attack him like a madman, and it seemed like he really wanted to kill him. Knowing that there was an expert like the Southern Sky Gate watching from afar, Lin Yi had a hard time figuring out how to deal with it. If it was just facing Yuzha, Lin Yi wouldn't be in a difficult position. He had a high chance of winning in a one-on-one fight. Even if his identity was exposed, it didn't matter. After all, even if he couldn't kill him, he still had a fatal weakness in his hands. But now Lin Yi didn't dare to expose his identity. Once he confirmed that Lin Yi was the second Lin they were looking for, who knew if the Southern Sky Gate would jump out and slap him to death. Lin Yi didn't have the chance to condense a super true chi bomb, so he had no way of dealing with the Southern Sky Gate, a peak Foundation establishment expert. If it really came to that, Lin Yi could only reveal Yuzha's fatal weakness of murdering his master. But if that happened, Yuzha, the rebellious disciple, would definitely die. But whether or not Lin Yi could survive would depend on the Southern Sky Gate. Maybe the Southern Sky Gate would let him go, or maybe the Southern Sky Gate would take care of him as well. Life or death, it all depended on the other party's decision. Plus, the Southern Sky Gate would also be suspicious. Where did he get the video? Why was he there? Lin Yi's reaction wasn't slow. The moment Yuzha made his move, he made a decision. Continue pretending. Since Yuzha made his move, he just had to dodge. Unless he really had no other choice, otherwise for Lin Yi, if he were to use his true strength at this time and expose his identity, things would be really troublesome. Relying on his instincts, Lin Yi narrowly avoided Yuzha's swift and fierce sword energy, his figure appearing to be rather strained. However, after Yuzha's attack missed, he did not give up. He immediately raised his hand and used the 21st form of the fatal chainsword. This time Lin Yi was forced into an extremely sorry state. Although he successfully dodged the attack once again, his right arm was scratched by the sword energy that brushed past him. It reflected a bright red bloodstain. Fortunately, he dodged fast enough and was only slightly scratched. Otherwise, his entire right arm would have been cut off. This was the awkward situation that Lin Yi was facing at the moment. It was not difficult to make the decision to continue acting, but it was extremely difficult to actually do it. If he didn't want to expose his identity in front of Yuzha, he couldn't use any of the martial techniques that he used in front of him before. Frenzied Fire 8 Trigrams Palm, Frenzied Fire Fist, Butterfly Subtle Steps. These were the martial techniques that Lin Yi was most familiar with. Otherwise he would be immediately seen through by Yuzha. This was the most difficult part. Facing Yuzha, a middle-stage foundational establishment stage expert, not only did Lin Yi reveal his true strength of the early-stage foundational establishment stage, he couldn't even use all of the martial techniques that he was proficient in. Falling into such a sorry state, it was easy to imagine. Fortunately, although Yuzha had killing intent, he did not use his true strength. For example, if he was only using the 21st form of the fatal consecutive sword, although Lin Yi was having a hard time dealing with it, it wasn't to the point where he couldn't hold on. After 2 to 3 exchanges, he saw that although Lin Yi was doing his best to dodge and maneuver, his 21st form of the fatal chainsword still left several wounds on his body. However, Yuja's killing intent weakened a lot when his own fatal consecutive sword 21 forms left several wounds on his body. At least, from the performance of these few exchanges, this Lin Yi and the Lin Air he was looking for were two completely different people. Words could lie, even looks could lie, but once they really fought, especially when facing the threat of death, fighting style wouldn't lie. Even if one wanted to purposely hide their martial techniques, when facing danger, the body would subconsciously react. This was an instinct that couldn't be controlled. And the stronger the cultivator, the stronger this self-preservation ability was. This was also why the stronger the expert, the harder it was to be ambushed and killed. Because even if one numbed their will, it was very difficult to fool their self-preservation instincts. This was originally a good thing, but for the current Lin Yi, it wasn't necessarily a good thing. Because if this continued, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. In reality, this was indeed the case. After just a few exchanges, Lin Yi already couldn't control the restless physical energy in his body. If Yuja persisted for a while longer, he might not be able to control himself. But at this time Yuja suddenly stopped. "I have no grievances with you, why do you want to kill me? Don't you know what the crime of attacking a newcomer of the welcoming pavilion is?" Lin Yi panted in a sorry state. There was an element of pretense here, but he really had a hard time pretending just now, and there were many wounds on his body. This wasn't fake. Don't talk nonsense. If you want to live, then try using your pill fire bomb. I'll give you this chance. Yuja said with a cold expression. Pill fire bomb? Lin Yi was instantly shocked. As he wondered why this Yuja suddenly changed tactics, he asked in surprise, "How do you know about the pill fire bomb?" "So you really know this move? Then I was right to come." Yuja's eyes lit up. After the previous probing, Lin Yi had basically been eliminated as a suspect in his heart, but he still needed to confirm it one last time. He now wanted to know if this so-called pill fire bomb was the same move as the big killing weapon that Lin Air threw on Nan Tianyong's face that day. About the pill fire bomb, did Kang Ming tell you? A light flashed in Lin Yi's mind and he suddenly asked. He didn't know if the pill fire bomb move existed on Heavenly Stage Island, but in this welcoming pavilion, the most obvious person that could be connected to the pill fire bomb was Kang Ming. Yuja couldn't help but be stunned. Kang Ming told him that this Lin Yi was an alchemist, and that he knew how to use the pill fire bomb. This in itself wasn't strange, but this Lin Yi directly guessed that it was Kang Ming. This was a bit strange. What do you mean? Yuja asked in a low voice. Chapter 3867. Did that mean he was being used by Kang Ming? Yuja immediately reacted. If Kang Ming had a personal grudge against Lin Yi, then he and the Southern Sky Gate might have really been used this time. There's something you might not know. Kang Ming is an alchemist, and the pill fire bomb has always been his specialty, Lin Yi said with an unfathomable expression. Are you telling the truth? Yuja's expression turned cold. Kang Ming had a personal grudge against Lin Yi. Kang Ming knew how to make the pill fire bomb, but he tricked him and the Southern Sky Gate into coming here to test Lin Yi. His intentions were obvious. Whether it's true or not, can't you tell with your abilities? Lin Yi asked calmly. I hope you're not lying. Otherwise, I believe you know better than me what will happen to you. Yuja glanced coldly at Lin Yi, then turned around and left as if he had received some orders. Before leaving, Yuja stopped in his tracks and turned around to say to Lin Yi, do you know why I want to kill you? Because you're very similar to the person I'm looking for, at least in some aspects. That's why you're unlucky. After saying this, Yuja quickly disappeared from Lin Yi's sight. Immediately after, Lin Yi discovered that Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai had come looking for him. Lin Yi finally understood. No wonder Yuja had suddenly stopped. The Southern Sky Gate must have discovered Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, and was afraid that more newcomers would be attracted. That was why they used 1,000 miles sound transmission to inform Yuja to stop. Boss, how are you? Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were shocked when they saw Lin Yi's injuries. They quickly ran over and asked nervously. I'm fine. It's just some superficial wounds. No need to make a fuss. Lin Yi smiled and shook his head, but he was glad in his heart. Fortunately, his two brothers found him in time to help him out of trouble. Today was not going to be easy to pass. Who did it? Boss, should we chase after them now? Xiao Hongkai could not help but feel indignant. How could a person with a personality like his just watch as his boss, Lin Yi, was injured? Even if he could not win, he still had to try. What's more, this was the welcome pavilion. The other party would at least have some scruples. Even if they weren't strong enough to fight one-on-one, if several of them attacked together, they might have a chance. There's no need. This small injury is already worth it. Lin Yi smiled mysteriously. What happened just now had been a close shave, and he'd have gotten himself killed if he'd accidentally revealed his identity, but the last few sentences he'd exchanged with Yuzha were enough to repay him. If he wasn't wrong, then Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha would most likely turn their attention to Kang Xiaoming. The best part was that Kang Xiaoming used the pillfire bomb as an excuse to draw their attention to him. He didn't know that in the end, little did he know, he had fallen into their trap. The Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha were both smart people, and smart people were extremely suspicious. Yuzha would not have placed the suspicion on Kang Ming. After all, strictly speaking, Kang Ming did not look like Lin Er. However, after what happened, it was impossible for the two smart people not to suspect him. Furthermore, this guy really did know how to use the pillfire bomb. Lin Yi really wanted to give Kang Ming two phrases. One was to go for wool and come home shorn. The other was to be caught in one's own trap. By the way, how did you guys find your way here? Lin Yi asked as he healed himself. He turned his head to ask Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. Although this place was not far from the newcomer's cave in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, under normal circumstances no one would come here. Furthermore, judging from Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai's expressions, it was obvious that they were here to look for him. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai looked at each other and said, "Actually, that woman told us. She asked us to come and collect your corpse, Morongjin?" Lin Yi was startled. He then remembered that when Yuzha came to look for him, although the other newcomers were in the cave and could not sense what was going on outside, Morongjin lived in a small wooden hut outside. Even the slightest disturbance would not escape her eyes. However, after what happened last night, this woman was obviously on the opposite side of him. If she allowed him to be killed by the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha, wouldn't that be exactly what she wanted? Although her words were not pleasant, it was obvious that she wanted Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai to help him out. What was she planning? Could it be that she still had not given up on him? Lin Yi could not help but feel confused. He could only sigh. Women were really hard to understand. They made enemies out of nowhere, but in the blink of an eye, they would help him out of trouble. It was really confusing. However, he was sure that she did not have good intentions. "Boss, do you think that woman has really taken a fancy to you?" On the way back to the cave, Xiao Hongkai chuckled with a face full of curiosity and gossip. Currently, in the eyes of the Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples, the most eye-catching person was undoubtedly Morongjin. Each and every one of her movements affected the minds of the new disciples. Even someone like Xiao Hongkai couldn't help but pay attention to her. Ever since Morongjin's appearance yesterday, although her every frown and smile was very attractive, she did not show much passion towards the newcomers. Only when she was with Lin Yi was she different. She seemed to take the initiative. If they were to find out that Beauty Murong had taken the initiative to go to Lin Yi's cave to take a bath, they would probably go crazy. Lin Yi rolled his eyes at him and curled his lips. "What do you like about me? Strength or background?" Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were momentarily at a loss for words. Although their boss, Lin Yi, was definitely unfathomable in terms of strength and background, at least on the surface he was not as strong as Beauty Murong. At that moment, Morongjin suddenly appeared in front of the three of them. She smiled coldly at Lin Yi and said, "I thought you didn't know how to appreciate favors. However, it seems that you do know your place. You're right. Whether it's strength or background, in my eyes you're the same as trash. Therefore, I advise you to be more sensible and make a wise choice. This beauty's patience is not that good." Choice. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. "Lady Murong, I've already made it very clear. Well water does not interfere with river water. This is my choice." Chapter 3868. Looking at Morongjin's back, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai looked at each other. Although Lin Yi had reminded them to keep their distance from Morongjin yesterday, they had already guessed that this woman was an enemy, not a friend. They had never thought that this day would come so soon. An expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, and a beautiful woman with an extraordinary background. This kind of enemy was very difficult to deal with. However, this was not what Lin Yi was thinking at this time. He suddenly understood why Morongjin would help him this time. The reason was very simple. She needed him to keep Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong in check. Now, among the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong were one group, while Lin Yi and the others were another group. As for Morongjin, it seemed that she did not want to join any group. After her attempt to subdue Lin Yi failed, she did not directly join Meng Jueguang's group. Instead, she wanted to become the third pole that could compete with the two groups. This was the only way to explain why this woman called Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai to help her out. If something happened to her, there was no doubt that the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion would be dominated by Meng Jueguang. Even with Murong Zhen's scheming, it would be difficult for her to compete with Meng Jueguang. After all, she had just arrived and had no foundation. It was possible to deal with a fool like Meng Tong, but Meng Jueguang was the eldest senior brother in charge. This position was not something she could replace. Taking refuge with him was no different from surrendering. This was not what she wanted to see. This woman wanted to control the overall situation. Now that she was not strong enough, she needed Lin Yi to distract Meng Jueguang's energy. This was the real reason why Murongzhen helped her out. This also confirmed Lin Yi's previous impression of this woman. This woman Murongzhen was really scheming. Otherwise, she would not have deliberately weighed the situation. After all, according to a normal woman's vengeful mentality, after becoming enemies with Lin Yi, even if her first reaction was not to kill him directly, she would definitely not help him out. It was already very open-minded of her to just stand by and watch. Only a truly shrewd person would make such a choice. This woman Murongzhen was truly a scheming person. It looks like the following days will not be so peaceful. Looking at Murongzhen's alluring back, Lin Yi could only helplessly shake his head. Originally, Lin Yi only needed to deal with Meng Jueguang and his gang. Especially since Meng Tong had laid low recently, no one tried to find trouble with him. Lin Yi could focus on cultivating and improving his strength. However, with the addition of this scheming woman, Murongzhen, it was unrealistic for him to be so carefree in the future. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai exchanged glances with each other and nodded in agreement. Although they had yet to understand Murongzhen's true intentions, they could feel that the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion were about to get lively. Let's go, the challenge is about to begin. Let's see what this woman is going to do, said Lin Yi to the two with a smile. Due to Murongzhen's participation, the situation had suddenly become complicated. Although Lin Yi was still confident that he could deal with these people, he could not afford to be too careless. Otherwise, if he was not careful, he might actually fail miserably. On the other hand, after Yu Zhe failed to test Lin Yi, he immediately returned to the Southern Heavenly Gate's side. He told the Southern Heavenly Gate everything that had just happened in full detail. Although the Southern Heavenly Gate must have seen everything from the beginning to the end, Yu Zhe was the one who had actually fought against Lin Er, while the Southern Heavenly Gate did not even know what Lin Er looked like. Therefore, Yu Zhe had the biggest say on whether or not this Lin Yi was the Lin Er they were looking for. After listening to Yu Zhe's detailed description, the Southern Heavenly Gate fell silent for a moment, before saying, "Just tell me one thing, is this Lin Yi the Lin Er we're looking for?" Martial uncle, although he looks similar at first glance, he's actually two completely different people. During the fight just now, I almost killed him a few times. If he really had the strength of Lin Er, he wouldn't have been able to hold himself back in the face of death, replied Yu Zhe in a deep voice. If it was said that this guy clearly had great strength but in order to hide his identity he would be too stupid. It was impossible for there to be such a fool in this world. If he lost his life, then what was the point of hiding? What he didn't know was that other people would fight back when faced with death, but Lin Yi had the art of dragon mastery, which allowed him to quickly recover. Even if he was beaten half to death, he would still be able to recover. Furthermore, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongsai's sudden appearance helped Lin Yi out of his predicament. The Southern Heavenly Gate nodded slightly. His opinion was similar to Yu Zhe's. Although he had never truly interacted with Lin Er, he knew that all experts had their own pride. If this Lin Yi was really an expert who could instantly kill Nan Tianyong, then without the Southern Heavenly Gate's appearance, he would definitely not let a mere Yu Zhe act so presumptuously. Overall, this Lin Yi is just an ordinary newcomer. He's just a little stronger, but he's nowhere near Lin Er's level. Furthermore, according to what Meng Jueguang said, this guy is a poor bastard without any spiritual jades. Think about it, how could a poor bastard like him catch the attention of an old fox like Hong Zhong? Yu Zhe continued. Due to his previous investigation, he didn't really believe that Lin Yi and Lin Er were the same person from the beginning. However, when he heard Kong Mingming mention the Pillfire Bomb, he felt that this move might really be similar to Lin Er's killer move, which was why he was still holding onto a sliver of hope. If that's the case, then we can eliminate this kid as a suspect. However, it's not like we didn't gain anything this time. Didn't this kid say that he has a grudge against Kong Mingming, and that the Pillfire Bomb has always been Kong Mingming's signature move? The Southern Heavenly Gate said with a dark expression. That's right. This Kong Xiaoming clearly knows how to make pellet fire bombs himself, but he's taking the initiative to please us. He's trying to divert our attention to someone unrelated to him. He's got ulterior motives. Yu Zhe was equally displeased. No matter if it was Yu Zhe or Southern Sky Gate, They both thought that they were smart people who could play with others in the palm of their hands. But now they were being played like a monkey by Kang Xiaoming, a newbie from Rising Sky Pavilion. How could they be happy? One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. The Southern Heavenly Gate's cold eyes flickered as he suddenly asked, "Martial nephew, think about it carefully. Could that kid Kang Ming be Lin Air?" Chapter 3869. Although Kang Ming was the same as Lin Yi, and his appearance was completely different from the Lin Yi they were looking for, this alone couldn't completely eliminate the suspicion. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tried to test Lin Yi again. Putting aside his appearance, Kang Ming was more suspicious than Lin Yi in every aspect. First of all, he was a disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion, and he had the backing of a young master like Su Lingchong. Whether it was his background or strength, he should be above Lin Yi in theory and closer to the image of Lin Yi. Secondly, if he wasn't Lin Yi, why would he rack his brains to divert the attention of the two people and pour dirty water on the irrelevant Lin Yi? If it was purely for personal revenge, why didn't he say that he knew how to use the Pillfire Bomb? If you want to know if Kang Ming knows how to use the Pillfire Bomb, that's easy. Use the same trick you used on Lin Yi on him again, and the truth will naturally come to light. Southern Sky Gate sneered. "Ah, Martial Uncle, that's not good, right?" Yuzha was shocked. To be honest, he had already taken a big risk by testing Lin Yi just now. If he had been seen by Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai just now, he might have had to go to the law enforcement hall to turn himself in. Now, Southern Sky Gate actually wanted him to test Kang Ming again. One had to know that Kang Ming was a new deacon, and his status was much higher than Lin Yi's, an ordinary grassroots newcomer of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Behind him was young Master Su Lingchong, and once something went wrong, it wasn't something that Yu Zhi, a mere inner disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion, could handle. Southern Sky Gate frowned in dissatisfaction. "I will bear all the consequences for you. What are you afraid of? If you shrink your head and feet, you won't be able to achieve anything." Yuzha couldn't help falling into a dilemma. Although Southern Sky Gate's words were domineering, the other side was still young Master Su's subordinate. If they really angered young Master Su and caused the situation to escalate, not to mention Southern Sky Gate, even the head of the Nan clan's three heroes, Nan Qianba, might not be able to handle it. At that time, the first one to suffer would definitely be him, Yuzha. However, Yuzha was coveting the Southern Sky Gate's lesser phaseless magic art, and he was counting on the Southern Sky Gate to help him find Lin Air. Therefore he couldn't wait to please the Southern Sky Gate, so why would he dare to go against their wishes? If he were to test Kang Xiaoming, then he would be putting himself in danger. But if he were to go against Southern Sky Gate's will, then it would make Southern Sky Gate feel bad for him. Southern Sky Gate was a smart and sensitive person. After that, it would be very difficult to correct it. At that time, he would probably not be able to rely on the minor phaseless god technique anymore. At this time, Yuzha was really in a dilemma. Seeing Yuzha cowering, Southern Sky Gate was about to reprimand him, but at that moment, they suddenly heard a commotion from the welcoming pavilion. From the sound of it, the newcomer challenge competition had begun. Yuzha instantly found a life-saving straw and hurriedly said, "Martial Uncle, look. Their newcomer challenge competition has begun. Even if the disciples want to test them, they have to wait until they finish. They can't attack Kang Ming in front of everyone. Don't you think so?" If he really made a move on Kang Xiaoming during the newcomer's challenge, then forget about Yu Zhi. Even if it was the Southern Sky Gate who made a move, he wouldn't be able to handle it. They would definitely be beaten into the dust by the enforcement hall. This reason was impeccable. Southern Sky Gate could only nod and say, "That's good. After they finish the competition, you can find a chance to test him. We can ignore everything else for now, but whether or not Kang Ming knows how to use the Pillfire Bomb, we have to figure it out today. Do you understand what I mean?" Yuzha hurriedly nodded. Disciple understands. Southern Sky Gate's meaning was very clear. If Kang Ming knew how to use the Pillfire Bomb, then from his actions of trying to divert the two's attention, the possibility of him being Lin Air was definitely not small. To Southern Sky Gate, Lin Air could be anyone in the welcoming pavilion. With Southern Sky Gate's power, they could easily crush anyone in the welcoming pavilion. However, if it was Kang Ming who Su Lingchong had personally admitted to being his subordinate, once young Master Su was involved, then the situation would become complicated. Under the background of Su Lingchong's covetous eyes, wanting to snatch the position of eldest senior brother of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, anything that could possibly involve young Master Su was no longer a small matter in the eyes of Southern Sky Gate. If they were the slightest bit careless, then it could become the fuse of an all-out war with young Master Su. Southern Sky Gate wasn't feeling guilty about this, it was just that up until now, he was far from being prepared to deal with it. However, from Yuji's point of view, although he was relieved after hearing Southern Sky Gate's orders, he was still a little worried. The newcomer competition could only help him by some time. Once the newcomer competition ended, even if he didn't want to jump into this pit, Southern Sky Gate would definitely force him to. There was no helping it. This was the sorrow of being a follower. Sometimes he would have to be the cannon fodder. Let's go take a look at that brat Kong Ming Ming. Southern Sky Gate strode towards the newcomer arena of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Even if he couldn't let Yuji directly test him, it was still a good idea to use the newcomer competition as an opportunity to observe him. Who knows, there might be some unexpected gains. Yes. Yuji followed behind Southern Sky Gate with complicated thoughts. At this moment he was thinking about a problem. When the newcomer competition ended, what excuse could he use to continue pushing it away? Even though he knew it was a very risky pit for a smart person like him, even if Southern Sky Gate forced him to, he definitely wouldn't jump into it easily. However, Yuji never expected that this difficult problem that he couldn't solve even after racking his brain, would be solved by Kong Ming Ming of his own accord. The reason was simple. Kong Ming Ming, in the following newcomer competition, was forced to use the Pillfire Bomb. There were so many newcomers in the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Although they all expressed their willingness to take care of Kong Ming Ming after receiving young Master Su's orders, the newcomers who were able to enter the Soaring Sky Pavilion all had a decent background. Even if they weren't as arrogant as Su Lingchong, they were still the second generation. None of them were truly docile. Even among the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, Lin Yi was an anomaly. The newcomers in the Soaring Sky Pavilion were even more confident. Naturally, there were many troublesome newcomers who were dissatisfied with young Master Su's arrangements. Of course, not all newcomers with random backgrounds dared to ignore young Master Su's tyranny. Therefore, regardless of how they felt in their hearts for the past 2 months, most of the newcomers in the Soaring Sky Pavilion were quite cooperative with young Master Su's orders on the surface. Chapter 3870. The newcomer who challenged Kong Ming Ming this time was called Shiryuda. Although his background was not very powerful, with the help of the elders in his family, he had just found a powerful backer. He was the nephew of the second elder of Soaring Sky Pavilion. Although this young master was not as powerful as Su Lingchong, the grandson of the third elder of Soaring Sky Pavilion, he was still powerful enough. He was definitely not afraid of Su Lingchong. As a result, the dissatisfaction that Shiryuda had suppressed in his heart for more than 2 months finally burst out in an instant. To be honest, Kang Xiaoming was just a newbie from the common world. His strength wasn't even close to the word strong. If it wasn't for Su Lingchong looking after him, he would have been nothing more than a piece of shit in the eyes of the newbies from Soaring Pavilion. They were already being generous by not stepping on him. But because of young Master Su, they had to pinch their noses and lift up Kong Ming Ming. They had to watch this scum of the secular world ride on their heads and act like a tyrant. What kind of bullshit feeling was this? Aggrieved. After holding back for more than 2 months, Shiryuda finally found the confidence to openly confront Su Lingchong. He could challenge Kong Ming Ming in the newcomer challenge without any fear. This was not only to vent his anger, but more importantly, it was also to express goodwill to the nephew of the second elder. It should be known that Su Lingchong was extremely ambitious in the circle of the second generation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, and many second-generation young masters were quite dissatisfied with him, and one of them was the nephew of the second elder. Now that Shiryuda had taken the initiative to challenge Kong Ming Ming, Su Lingchong's little brother, it was a show of loyalty. Once he succeeded, he would definitely be appreciated more in the future. As for strength, although he was still at the peak of heaven stage, taking the initiative to challenge Kong Ming Ming, a master at the early stage of foundation establishment, seemed to be courting death, but it was not impossible because Kong Ming Ming was an alchemist. An alchemist who relied on constantly taking pills to barely reach the early stage of foundation establishment. One could imagine how weak they were. Even a heaven stage great perfection expert like Shiryuda might not necessarily have no chance of winning. Think about it, in a highly anticipated event like the newcomer challenge competition, if the weak could defeat the strong and step on Kong Ming Ming, the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, for the first time in history, how big of a sensation would it cause? Not only would he be able to vent his anger, but he would also be able to gain face for his new backer. More importantly, it was very likely that he would be able to leave an impression on the higher-ups of Soaring Sky Pavilion. What a great harvest this was. If Shiryuda still did not dare to stand up and challenge Kong Ming Ming, then he would really be a newcomer of Soaring Sky Pavilion. Moreover, it wasn't as if he didn't have a trump card. Previously he had taken a golden elixir. In this way he could have the strength of an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator for a short period of time. He was even more confident in dealing with Kang Ming Ming. When he saw Shi Yuda standing up with a sneer and taking the initiative to challenge him, Kang Ming Ming was completely stunned. It was just as Shi Yuda had thought. Although he was an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, if he really wanted to fight to the death, he might not be able to defeat a Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert. If he lost to Shi Yuda, the Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert, then he, Kang Ming Ming, would really be nailed to the pillar of shame of Soaring Sky Pavilion. People would not care whether you were an alchemist or not. They would only pay attention to one thing. You, an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, actually couldn't defeat a Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert. Not only would Kang Ming Ming lose face, but he would also lose face. Even Su Lingchong, the backer behind him, would lose face. At that time, it would be hard to say whether young Master Su would still take care of him like now. So this time, when faced with Shi Yuda's public provocation, Kang Ming Ming didn't dare to fail no matter what. Otherwise, if he lost young Master Su's care, who knew how miserable he would be in the future? What made Kang Ming Ming helpless was that even if he was an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, facing an aggressive Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert, he really didn't have any confidence in winning. If he really let the opponent seize the initiative in the arena, even if he had an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator's true chi, there was still a possibility that he would be suffocated to death in the end. The only killing move he was confident in was only one move, the Pill Fire Bomb. The power of the Pill Fire Bomb was needless to say. If he really forced it out, not to mention the opponent was a mere Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert, even an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator of the same level would be killed in one move. However, the biggest flaw was that this move needed time to accumulate power, and the greater the power, the longer the time needed to accumulate power in advance. Normally, Shi Yuda wouldn't give Kang Ming Ming such a chance at all. However, for a cunning person like Kang Ming Ming, it was really easy for him to find an excuse to delay time. I'm a newcomer deacon. If I directly accept the challenge and get injured, it is very likely that it will affect my duty to record and publicize the newcomer's points. This is an irresponsible behavior, so I need some time to find someone to hand over the work, just in case. This was the reason given by Kang Ming Ming. It was dignified and impeccable. Shi Yuda didn't expect that Kang Ming Ming would secretly take the opportunity to accumulate a big move. When both sides walked into the arena, Kang Ming Ming didn't say anything and threw a Pill Fire Bomb. Shi Yuda was directly blown up on the spot. The battle ended in an instant, and he ate his golden core for nothing. Seeing Kang Ming Ming walk off the arena with a smug face, everyone present was shocked. Before this, they thought that Kang Ming Ming was a soft persimmon that relied on young Master Su to get his position. But they didn't expect him to be such a ruthless character. To deal with a mere Heaven Stage Great Perfection, he actually used such a big killer move. He almost blew up the entire arena that had been reinforced with arrays. What kind of hatred did he have? All of a sudden, everyone looked at Kang Xiaoming with awe that they had never felt before. It made Kang Xiaoming feel great. All along, although he had been acting like a tyrant in front of the Soaring Sky Pavilion's newcomers, it was all because of Su Lingchong's power. They dared not say anything even though they were angry. But today he had defeated the blind Shi Yuda with one move, and he even used a Pill Fire Bomb, which was an extremely deterrent move. This time, Kang Ming Ming finally experienced what it felt like to be the #1 newcomer in the Soaring Sky Pavilion. It felt great. However, Kang Ming Ming never expected that although his Pill Fire Bomb had indeed shocked the Soaring Sky Pavilion's newcomers, it also fell into the eyes of Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha. That's right, the move that Lin Air used to kill Master was this Pill Fire Bomb. Yuzha was overjoyed when he saw this and quickly pointed it out to Southern Sky Gate. Chapter 3871. When Lin Yi used the Super Chi Bomb against Nan Tianyong, it was very sudden and Yuzha was quite far away, so he couldn't see the details clearly. He could only vaguely feel the shocking power. At first glance, the feeling was quite similar to when Kang Ming Ming used the Pill Fire Bomb. Are you sure? Southern Sky Gate frowned. Disciple is sure. Yuzha said firmly. Kang Ming Ming's Pill Fire Bomb was very similar to the move he had seen before. Even if there was a slight difference, he would still insist on it to prevent Southern Sky Gate from forcing him to test the others. It was very risky to do this kind of thing too often. Southern Sky Gate did not doubt Yuzha's words when he saw how certain Yuzha was. His eyes were filled with anger, So, this kid Kong Ming Ming is most likely that Lin. How dare he fool me? Did he eat the guts of a leopard and think that I won't kill him? Disciple can't say that I'm 100% sure, but from this pill firebomb and the way this kid deliberately diverted our attention, there's an 80% chance he is. Yuzha was also filled with anger. No matter what, he was an inner disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, but he was fooled by a mere newcomer like Kong Ming Ming. He could not take it anymore. Boom. Before Yuzha finished speaking, a huge rock beside Southern Sky Gate instantly turned into powder, attracting the attention of the newcomers. They pointed at it and discussed it. This boulder was smashed by the Southern Sky Gate in a fit of rage. He wanted nothing more than to tear Kong Xiaoming to pieces in front of everyone, but he wasn't a brainless idiot. No matter how angry he was, he knew that he couldn't attack Kong Xiaoming in front of everyone, so he could only vent his anger on the boulder. Being stared at by Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha, even in broad daylight with so many people around, Kong Ming Ming could not help but feel a chill down his spine. He was puzzled. What's wrong with these two? Why aren't you hurrying over to kill Lin? Why are you glaring at me like a fiend? Under everyone's gaze, Kong Ming Ming had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk over. He took the initiative to ask, "Eldest senior brother, what can I do for you?" The Southern Sky Gate was the eldest senior brother who was in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. In theory, every disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, including the new disciples, had to call him eldest senior brother. Although Kong Ming Ming was trying to raise his status by calling him eldest senior brother, it was not wrong. The Southern Heavenly Gate looked at him coldly and said expressionlessly, "I've already seen Lin. This time I really have to thank Deacon Kong for your guidance. Don't worry, I will keep it in mind and will definitely repay you in the future." Kong Ming Ming thought that the two of them had already killed Lin. He was overjoyed. "You flatter me. It's my duty to serve eldest senior brother. I don't need anything in return. Eldest senior brother, you're too kind." He thought that the repayment that the Southern Sky Gate mentioned would be something good. At this moment, his heart was filled with anticipation. After all, the Southern Sky Gate was the eldest senior brother who was in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. His actions would definitely not be small. Little did he know that the repayment that the Southern Sky Gate mentioned was completely different from what he had in mind. "Don't worry. I won't be courteous." The Southern Sky Gate smiled coldly and left with Yuzha. Watching the two of them leave, Kong Ming Ming was overjoyed, but he couldn't help but feel confused. Why did the two of them look so cold when they looked at me? "Martial uncle, what should we do next?" Yuzha couldn't help but ask. Although they had locked onto Kong Ming Ming as a suspect, logically speaking, the target was very clear. What they should do next was also very clear. If it was someone else, they would have captured the person without hesitation. However, this person was Su Lingqiong's underling. Even the Southern Sky Gate didn't dare to act recklessly. The Southern Heavenly Gate suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked Yuzha up and down with a cold expression. Only when Yuzha was scared out of his wits did he say, "Martial nephew, how did you end up in conflict with Second Lin?" The Southern Sky Gate wasn't clear about the conflict between Yuzha and Second Lin. He only knew that Nan Tianyong was killed by Second Lin because he wanted to avenge his disciple. However, he had never asked about the cause. Yuzha hesitated for a moment, then answered vaguely, "Martial uncle, disciple first started a conflict with Second Lin because he competed to buy an item from the Hong Merchant Guild. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yuzha would never let the Southern Sky Gate know about the Star Ink Stone. After all, the Southern Sky Gate was an expert at the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm, and was about to break through to the Golden Core realm. Therefore, the Star Ink Stone was even more attractive to him than to Yuzha. Once the Southern Sky Gate knew about the existence of the Star Ink Stone, then even if they could take it back from Second Lin, Yuzha wouldn't have a share. Yuzha obviously wouldn't do something as stupid as making a wedding dress for someone else. What is it? The Southern Sky Gate wasn't easy to deal with. It wasn't easy for Yuzha to trick him. He instantly realized the key point. Yuzha's heart tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm and said, "It's just a normal treasure used to aid in cultivation. It's not very valuable, but it's not very common." "Normal treasure?" The Southern Sky Gate frowned, then asked suspiciously, "Is it really just a normal treasure?" Then if Kong Ming Ming really is Second Lin as Su Lingqiong's underling, and with such a hidden strength, would he compete with you for a mere normal treasure? Yuzha was speechless. He had made up a lie in a moment of desperation, but he forgot that the person in front of him was also extremely shrewd. He was immediately caught on to the loophole. Seeing that Yuzha was stuttering, the Southern Sky Gate's expression instantly became even colder. he said in a deep voice. I thought about it carefully just now. This Kong Ming Ming was sent by Su Lingchong to find him for help, and he's also Su Lingchong's underling. If he really is second Lin, I suspect that Su Lingchong might be behind this. The Southern Sky Gate paused, looked at the somewhat flustered Yuzha, and his tone became unprecedentedly stern. Now that Su Lingchong is eyeing my position as the big senior brother, I definitely won't let go of any possible hidden dangers. If necessary, even if it's against Martial Nephew, I don't mind using some sinister methods. Martial Nephew, you should have heard from your master that I'm proficient in the small phaseless technique, and I've also fused some of those evil martial skills, so I know a soul-searching technique that can directly read other people's memories, right? Chapter 3872. Soul-Searching Art. Yuzha had indeed heard about it from his cheap master, Nan Tianyong, who had died in his hands. It was a secret art that the Southern Heaven Gate had learned when he was still in the enforcement hall. It allowed him to read the memories of others. In front of him there were no secrets to speak of. Of course, this secret art could only be used when the opponent had lost the ability to resist, and the opponent's divine sense had to be weaker than the user's. Once used, the target's divine sense would collapse. Even if they were lucky enough not to die, they would become a muddle-headed fool. Yuzha knew that if he continued to lie like this, Southern Sky Gate might actually attack him out of anger. At that time, forget about getting the Star Ink Stone and becoming the strongest Golden Core expert. He might not even be able to live past today. Even if he was lucky, he would at most become a fool. What was there to look forward to? At that moment, Yuzha was sweating profusely. Although he wanted to fabricate another lie and continue to hide the secret of the Star Ink Stone, under the pressure of Southern Sky Gate, even a sly person like Yuzha's mind was blank. It was easy to make up a lie, but to make it so perfect that even the Southern Sky Gate couldn't find any flaws in it was impossible in a short period of time. Once the Southern Sky Gate saw through even the slightest flaw, Yuzha would be done for today. With his strength, there was no way he could escape the Southern Sky Gate's grasp. At that moment, Yuzha was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He wanted to slap himself 18 times. What kind of person was Southern Sky Gate? Why did he want to make use of him? Wasn't he being blinded by his own greed? Now, not only did he not get any benefits, he even got himself into trouble. Have you made up your mind? If you don't want to say it, then don't blame me for not considering our relationship. Southern Sky Gate was about to attack. Since there was no one around, there was nothing to worry about. Yuzha jumped in fright and didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He hurriedly said, "Martial Uncle, please wait. It's not that I'm trying to hide it. It's just that this is a long story and I'm afraid of wasting Martial Uncle's time. Since Martial Uncle wants to hear it, then I won't hide anything." "Okay, speak." Southern Sky Gate's expression softened a little. Words could lie, but the soul-searching technique would never. If it were not for the fact that the secret technique of soul-searching technique would also cause damage to one's divine sense, making it inadvisable to use it frequently. Only then would he care about Yuzha's little life. He would probably have made a move a long time ago. But Yuzha didn't know that his little life was more important. In the end, he had no choice but to tell the entire story to the Southern Heavenly Gate. He even told them about the Star Ink Stone, leaving out the fact that Nan Tianyong had died at his hands. With the Star Ink Stone as a distraction, the Southern Sky Gate didn't care about such a small matter. After hearing the usage of the Star Ink Stone, the eyes of this high and mighty soaring sky pavilion steward instantly lit up. "Staring Stone. Apprentice Nephew, are you certain that this item can assist in breaking through to the Golden Core stage? Let cultivators become the strongest Golden Core experts?" The Southern Sky Gate's tone was a little anxious. Although he was far above Yuzha in terms of seniority and experience, he wasn't like Yuzha, who had holed up in a place like the library for 3 whole years and read almost all the ancient texts. It wasn't strange that he didn't know the uses of Star Ink Stone. Reporting to Martial Uncle, disciple can't guarantee whether or not it really has such a miraculous effect. But the ancient texts did record it this way. Although Yuzha's heart was bleeding, he still replied respectfully on the surface. Since he had already revealed the information about the Star Ink Stone, then the Star Ink Stone that he had been thinking about had nothing to do with him anymore. Therefore, Yuzha decided that he had to curry favor with the Southern Sky Gate. Even if he couldn't dream about the Star Ink Stone, he had to at least get the minor phaseless god technique from him. Otherwise he would really suffer a great loss. The ancient texts in the library are all well documented. Since it's all recorded like this, then there shouldn't be too many discrepancies. To be able to let someone become the strongest Golden Core expert, it's simply a rare treasure. Even with the shrewdness of the Southern Sky Gate, he couldn't hide the greed on his face. There was no cultivator under the Golden Core stage who wouldn't be moved by something like Star Inkstone. No matter how deep their background was, they wouldn't be an exception. After a moment of excitement, the Southern Sky Gate suddenly slapped his head and said, "That's right. Originally, I wasn't sure if this matter had anything to do with Su Ling Chong, but now that the Star Inkstone is involved, everything can be explained." Disciple is slow-witted, please enlighten me, martial uncle. Yuzha was still immersed in the sadness of not being able to obtain the Star Inkstone, so he didn't think about this at all. Martial nephew, think about it. You and I want the Star Inkstone and that second Lin wants it. Don't tell me that young Master Su Ling Chong doesn't want it? The Southern Sky Gate asked. Of course he wants it. Whoever obtains it will have the chance to become the strongest Golden Core expert. Yuzha nodded his head resolutely. A treasure like the Star Inkstone was an existence that reigned above all factions and backgrounds. Even a second-generation cultivator with a deep background wouldn't be able to resist its temptation. Su Ling Chong was naturally not an exception. Therefore, this indirectly proves that Kong Ming Ming is second Lin. I suspect that Kong Ming Ming's stealing of the Star Inkstone was Su Ling Chong's instigation. This is the only reason that can explain why the two of them teamed up to deceive us. The Southern Sky Gate said through clenched teeth. Martial uncle is wise. Yuzha flattered without another word. He couldn't be bothered to figure out whether or not the Southern Sky Gate speculation was reasonable. The only thing he had to do now was to curry favor with the Southern Sky Gate. No wonder Su Ling Chong dared to openly challenge me today. It turns out that after obtaining the Star Inkstone, he doesn't place me in his eyes anymore. The Southern Sky Gate said through clenched teeth. However, he immediately thought back to the day when he visited Shanghai Tianhua. Shangguan Laner's reaction seemed to be purposely helping to conceal Second Lin's identity. Moreover, the matter of Su Ling Chong courting Shangguan Laner was known to everyone in the Soaring Sky Pavilion. The Southern Sky Gate couldn't help but guess, could it be that Shangguan Laner was involved as well? Could it be that Su Ling Chong obtained the Star Inkstone in order to curry favor with Shangguan Laner? This possibility wasn't impossible because in a few days, it would be Shangguan Laner's birthday. It was very likely that Su Ling Chong would use the Star Inkstone as a present to curry favor with the Shangguan Laner. Although the Star Inkstone was rare, if he could use it to become the grandson-in-law of Shanghai Tianhua, one Star Inkstone was definitely not a loss. Chapter 3873. Thinking of this, Southern Sky Gate felt a headache. The situation was getting more and more complicated. Not only was young Master Su Ling Chong involved, but even Miss Shangguan was involved. What should he do? It was true that Southern Sky Gate was the senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, but facing Su Ling Chong alone was already stressful enough. If Miss Shangguan, who had an even fiercer background, was involved, he had no chance of winning. That way, if he dared to make a move on Kong Ming Ming, not only would he provoke Su Ling Chong, he would also provoke Miss Shangguan, and might even provoke the big shots behind these two. If things were to develop to this point, not to mention Southern Sky Gate, even if the leader of the Nan family's three heroes, Nan Tianba, came back, he would be scared shitless. Even if their uncle, Nan Tian Aurora, who was far away on Middle Island, appeared, it would still be useless. Their uncle, Nan Tian Aurora, was one of the most prosperous figures in the Nan clan's middle generation. Not only was he powerful, but he was also the chancellor of the Heaven Stage Islands Cultivators Academy. Be it his status or his influence, he was by no means insignificant. Unfortunately, this was the North Island's three great pavilions. Even if Nantian Aurora had some influence on Middle Island, he was too far away. Even if he stretched out his hand, people like Shanghai Tianhua, who were at the top of the North Island, would not listen to him. The situation was getting more and more complicated. With so many important people involved, even Southern Sky Gate couldn't help but lose his mind. At least, before boss Nan Tianba returned, he wouldn't dare to act rashly. The water in this matter was too deep. Although his title as the first senior brother of the Soaring Sky Pavilion steward was awe-inspiring, it was not useful at all. Let's go back first. When boss returns in 2 days, we'll discuss countermeasures. Southern Sky Gate frowned and pondered for a moment. In the end, he decided to bide his time. Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha returned to the cave with a belly full of thoughts. On the other hand, Lin Yi, after framing Kong Ming Ming, immediately appeared at the newcomer challenge. However, seeing a powerful rookie like Lin Yi, who had always shown off, appear covered in blood, the rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion were shocked. Even Meng Jueguang could not help but feel dazed. Fuck. What kind of big shot did this kid offend? God is blind. Why hasn't he been beaten to death even though he's injured to this extent? Meng Jueguang exclaimed in pity. Normally, when a new disciple was injured, his first reaction as a steward would be to report it to the higher-ups and then spare no effort to find the culprit. But now he was too lazy to even go through this superficial formality. His attitude towards Lin Yi was clear at a glance. Beside him, Meng Tong gloated and said, "Ninth cousin, do you think it's possible that this kid went to harass Beauty Morong and got beaten up by her?" Looking at all the rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion, including the steward, Meng Jueguang, apart from Lin Yi and a few others, all of them were drooling over the seductive Beauty Morong Zhen. Morong Zhen's special treatment of Lin Yi made them envious. Especially people like Meng Tong. People who wished they could kneel down under Morong Zhen's skirt and lick her toes. They were even more envious and jealous of Lin Yi. Now that they saw Lin Yi injured, they could not help but think in that direction. He wasn't just spouting nonsense. Last night, Morong Zhen went to look for Lin Yi. Although it was already late at night, Morong Zhen was still living in a small wooden hut in an open space. His every move was being watched by the newcomers, so it was almost impossible for this kind of thing to escape the eyes and ears of those with ulterior motives. Naturally, Meng Tong was one of them. Although he didn't know what exactly had happened, he didn't care. However, it was certain that Morong Zhen and Lin Yi parted on bad terms. As for Lin Yi, everyone knew that he was a lecher. Although he pretended to be serious, it was hard to say how dirty he was. With his strength in the early stage of the building foundation realm, if he really angered Morong Zhen, who was at the peak of the early stage of the building foundation realm, he would be lucky if he was beaten up. It would not be too much for him to be killed directly. You're saying it was Morong Zhen's doing? Meng Jueguang observed Morong Zhen and Lin Yi with a playful expression. He realized that the relationship between the two of them was indeed not good. There seemed to be a faint sense of wariness and hostility between them. Meng Tong chuckled coldly. "Ninth cousin, think about it, out of all the newbies on our side, there's no one other than Miss Morong who could make Lin Yi suffer so much." That's true. Since Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha were very careful to keep it a secret, Meng Jueguang did not think in that direction. There was only one question he was most concerned about at the moment, and that was Morong Zhen's stance. Before Morong Zhen came, it was already quite difficult for him to face Lin Yi and his gang alone. Especially recently, Meng Tong had been holding back on purpose, and Lin Yi and his gang had completely defeated him. He had almost lost his face as the senior brother in charge. All he could do was to comfort himself with one sentence: "A little impatience will spoil the great plan." Now, before Lin Yi's side was settled, another troublesome Morong Zhen, who was no less difficult to deal with than Lin Yi. Meng Jueguang had been worried for the whole night. After all, judging from Morong Zhen's behavior in the beginning, she seemed to have a good impression of Lin Yi. Lin Yi and his gang were already too much for Meng Jueguang to handle. If Morong Zhen, who was at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm, were they going to be able to handle it? However, after seeing the subtle conflict between the two, Meng Jueguang finally felt relieved. As long as Morong Zhen did not side with Lin Yi, things would be easier to handle. Morong Zhen was only a woman. Even if her strength was not bad, she had no background as she had just arrived. No matter how cunning she was in Meng Jueguang's eyes, it was impossible for her to stand on her own. She only had two choices. Either side with Lin Yi or side with Meng Jueguang. Now, since Morong Zhen was not on good terms with Lin Yi, she could only side with Meng Jueguang. This woman can actually be considered a rare stunner. Meng Jueguang pinched his chin and stared greedily at Morong Zhen's enchanting figure. He could not stop praising her. In the 3 pavilions of the North Island, female cultivators were rare to begin with, and one as beautiful as Morong Zhen was even rarer. Generally speaking, even if there was one, it was the exclusive property of young masters like Su Lingchong. It was impossible for a low-level steward like Meng Jueguang to benefit from it. This time Meng Jueguang knew his chance had come. Morong Zhen was not a chaste woman. Once she was forced to side with him, she would not be unreasonable. It was time to have a good time. Chapter 3874. Just as Meng Jueguang had expected, Morong Zhen did not show any displeasure when he sensed his burning gaze. Instead, he licked his lips seductively and winked at Meng Jueguang. In an instant, Meng Jueguang's entire body went limp. If it wasn't for the rookie challenge being held in such a public setting, he probably would have dragged this coquettish woman into the cave abode to have a 300 round of sex. Meng Tong curled his lips in jealousy. Although Meng Jueguang was his backer when it came to women, even his father had to step aside. Of course, with his current strength, he could not escape from Meng Jueguang's protection. No matter how dissatisfied he was, he could only hold it in for the time being. Unexpectedly, Meng Jueguang quickly recovered from his captivation and returned to normal as he said, "You really are a hussy. But if you want to obtain my approval, you're still far from it." No matter how much he coveted Murong Zhen, Meng Jueguang was not as simple-minded as Meng Tong. He could not make him bow down to her with just one look. If Murong Zhen did not take any action, then even if she took the initiative to offer herself, Meng Jueguang would only be putting on a show. He would not treat her as one of his own. The action that Meng Jueguang wanted to see was very simple. He wanted Murong Zhen to stand up and deal with Lin Yi in front of everyone. That was the real proof of loyalty. This newcomer challenge competition was Murong Zhen's first official appearance since she came to the Welcome Pavilion. Only through her actual actions could one truly guess her stance. Apart from that, all the flowery words were useless. Not only Meng Jueguang but Lin Yi was also staring at Murong Zhen's actions, trying to figure out her real intentions. This woman was an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. In other words, apart from Lin Yi himself, the rest of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, including Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, were all at the same level. They were far from being her opponents. This was a variable that could break the balance of the rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion. If this woman really wanted to do something, even if Lin Yi could handle it, his subordinates, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, would not be able to handle it. A moment later, under everyone's gaze, Murong Zhen, the newcomer who had just arrived, was the first to walk onto the ring. She said in a clear and charming voice, "Sir Judge, I, Murong Zhen from cave number 16 at the foot of the mountain, challenge Cha Wu from cave number 15 at the foot of the mountain." As soon as he said that, everyone present was stunned, and Cha Wu, who was the one being challenged, instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot. "Fuck you. I've already been sent to the most dilapidated and worn-out cave abode number 15 at the foot of the mountain, and that's not enough. Now, a freaking Murong Zhen came and called me out as soon as he arrived. You're a freaking expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, beautiful." Cha Wu couldn't help but want to roar in front of everyone. Unfortunately, he didn't have the guts. After hearing these words, he could only weakly walk onto the stage and directly admit defeat. None of them dared to challenge Murong Zhen, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation building realm. Cha Wu's fate was to pay a little challenge points and hand over the number 15 cave residence at the foot of the mountain, which he thought was already the worst, and move to an even worse wooden house. As a result, his negative score in the first 4 rounds of the newcomer exam was already a foregone conclusion. There was no way to escape. Unexpectedly, before Murong Zhen got off the stage, he took the initiative to suggest, "Little brother, if you don't mind, we are only exchanging rankings. And you can continue to live in the number 15 immortal cave at the foot of the mountain. How about it?" Cha Wu was instantly stunned. Everyone else looked confused as well. Murong Zhen covered her mouth and smiled. She said in a coquettish voice that made one's scalp tingle, I'm a neat freak. I don't want to live in a dirty cave residence. Instead, I prefer the wooden house that everyone built for me." That's great. Thank you, Ms. Murong." Cha Wu immediately expressed his gratitude after he came to his senses. Although the number 15 cave residence at the foot of the mountain was the worst cave in the Welcome Pavilion, it was not worthy of an expert like Murong Zhen's attention. However, for a lowly person like him who was at the bottom of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's newcomers, no matter how bad the spiritual energy in the worst cave residence was, it was still much better than the wooden house outside. Murong Zhen flashed a charming smile, then walked down the arena while swaying her hips. While Murong Zhen was enjoying the admiration of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's newcomers, Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang shook their heads at the same time. They did not understand the meaning behind Murong Zhen's actions. During the newcomers' challenge round, one had to fight from the last abode all the way up. This was the best strategy to obtain as many challenge points as possible. It would not be strange for anyone else to do so, but it was strange for Murong Zhen to do so. She had joined the class midway and was already a peak early-stage Foundation establishment expert. Furthermore, she had the background of an elder of the Soaring Pavilion. Even if she were to stay in the Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future, she would not have to worry about not having a backer. In theory, there was no need for her to pay too much attention to the newcomer assessment, which was already halfway through. There was no need for her to start from the last cave residence. According to Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang's conjecture, Morong Zhen's appearance today was to ensure that she would be able to survive here in the future. It was highly likely that she would use her actions to make her stand clear. For example, she could challenge either Xiao Ran or Qiao Hongkai. She could also directly challenge Lin Yi. Only then would Meng Jueguang feel her value. Of course, there were other possibilities as well. For example, she could challenge Meng Tong. Even though this would make Meng Jueguang see her as an enemy, it was also a way to make her presence known. Because of Lin Yi's group, even Meng Jueguang could not do anything to her. However, Morong Zhen did not choose any of the above. Instead, she chose a method that nobody expected. She chose to challenge Cha Wu, who was in the 15th cave. Therefore, no matter Lin Yi or Meng Jueguang, they could not understand what this woman was planning. To them, challenging Cha Wu was a completely meaningless move for Morong Zhen. Even if she did not do anything, there was no need for her to do anything unnecessary and arouse suspicion. Or in other words, Morong Zhen's goal was to make Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang doubt her, which would make them hesitate. This was not impossible. Even though Morong Zhen had already fallen out with Lin Yi, if she wanted to become the third pole of the tripod, she could not directly side with Meng Jueguang. Otherwise she would directly go against Lin Yi. If she was misunderstood by Lin Yi and the two of them fought to the death, then she could only become Meng Jueguang's subordinate and accomplice. She wanted to make her presence known, make Meng Jueguang feel like he was getting closer to him, and at the same time, not make Lin Yi misunderstand her. Throughout this process, she wanted to establish her position in front of the rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion. This was Morong Zhen's true intention. As for the next few rounds of the rookies' challenge, everything went according to Morong Zhen's plan. She did not fight against any of the core members of Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang. She only challenged the caves one by one. Chapter 3875. This woman isn't as simple as she seems. Lin Yi had completely understood Morong Zhen's plan. He believed that Meng Jueguang was doing the same. However, even though they knew this, there was nothing they could do to Morong Zhen. They could only watch as Morong Zhen became the third-level existence that everyone looked up to, yet they could not do anything about it. Otherwise, if Morong Zhen decided to side with the slightest sign of trouble, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? They finally realized that Morong Zhen was planning something that no one could stop. Furthermore, due to the rules of the newcomer challenge, they had no way of stopping her. They could only watch as the woman slowly established her foundation and spread her wings. However, the good news for Lin Yi was that he only had two subordinates, Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai. With Lin Yi's order, it would not be easy for Morong Zhen to seduce them. On the other hand, Meng Jueguang's side was different. His subordinates were not very loyal. Furthermore, everyone, including Meng Tong, was drooling over the beauty Morong Zhen. As Morong Zhen slowly established her position, it was very likely that these people would be swayed by the wind. Due to being suppressed by Lin Yi and his group, Meng Jueguang's control over the newcomers had dropped to a freezing point. Even if these people did not dare to betray him openly, if Morong Zhen were to give them a flirtatious look, or even give them some benefits, it was believed that not many people would refuse to flirt with the beauty Morong Zhen. Morong Zhen's brilliance was that even if Meng Jueguang knew that she was trying to poach him, he could only endure it for the time being, in order not to make the situation worse, in order not to force Morong Zhen to side with Lin Yi. While Morong Zhen was stirring up a storm in the newcomer welcoming pavilion, Southern Sky Gate and Yu Zhe, who were far away in the soaring pavilion, finally arrived. The leader of the Nan clan's three heroes, Nan Tianba. Nan Tianba had just returned from a mission. He was still wearing his sinister-looking black armor as he sat on the main seat. He looked sternly at Yu Zhe, who was trembling on the ground, not daring to move. He then looked at the nervous Southern Heavenly Gate. Suppressing the two of them until they couldn't breathe, Nan Tianba finally suppressed his anger and said, "This king has only left the island to carry out a mission for 2 months, yet such a big thing actually happened. Third brother lost his life and you still haven't caught the culprit. Second brother, you've really disappointed this king." At the same time, because Nan Tianba had just experienced a cruel massacre, his expression changed. A murderous aura combined with a powerful aura forced Yu Zhe, a middle-stage foundation building expert, to lie on the ground, not daring to move a muscle. After all, the person before them was an existence that surpassed the peak of the foundation establishment realm in the South Heaven Gate. He was a true Golden Core expert, who was regarded as a cornerstone of the three great pavilions. In addition to Yu Zhe, even the South Heaven Gate, the eldest senior brother in charge of the sky-soaring pavilion, had his forehead covered in cold sweat. "Big brother, it's not that I don't want to avenge third brother. It's just that I've already told you in detail. This Kong Ming Ming not only involves Su Ling Chong, but also eldest Miss Shangguan. This is no small matter. I really don't dare to act blindly without thinking. South Heaven Gate complained with a sullen face. Hearing this, Nan Qianba couldn't help but frown. With his powerful golden core stage strength, people like Su Ling Chong and Shanghai Laner couldn't even enter his eyes. He didn't care about them at all, but the big shots behind them were the ones who stood at the peak of the entire North Island. Even a golden core stage expert like him didn't dare to provoke them. What's more, now that Su Ling Chong was eyeing the position of the eldest senior brother in charge of the Sky-Soaring Pavilion, this was the time when they needed a relationship with the higher-ups. Otherwise, if a big boss like Shanghai Tianhua were to casually open his mouth, South Heaven Gate would have no choice but to give up his position without any resistance. After a long silence, Nan Qianba finally opened his mouth and said, "Fine, this situation is indeed difficult to deal with. This matter can't be completely blamed on you. The most important thing right now is to protect your position as the eldest senior brother in charge of the Sky-Soaring Pavilion. As for third brother, we'll think of a way to avenge him later." Southern Heaven Gate's position could allow him to gain a lot of benefits. Even Nan Qianba benefited a lot from it. Therefore, even if Southern Heaven Gate wanted to give up, he wouldn't agree. Seeing that Nan Qianba finally didn't hold on to third brother's matter, Southern Heaven Gate immediately let out a sigh of relief and nodded, "I'll listen to Big Brother's orders. You've always been resourceful. Why don't you tell me what we should do next?" Nan Qianba gestured for Southern Heaven Gate to come up with a plan. Although he was the eldest of the Nan family's 3 heroes and his strength was undeniable, he didn't like these troublesome matters. "Big Brother, just the two of us alone aren't enough. Therefore, I think it's necessary to let Middle Island's uncle come forward and write a letter to the higher-ups of the Sky-Soaring Pavilion. Even if we can't convince all of them, we can at least increase our prestige. At least we won't appear to be too weak. These higher-ups will still have some concerns and won't all side with Su Ling Chong." Southern Heaven Gate suggested. "Alright, we'll do as you say. I'll write a letter to Uncle now." Nan Qianba nodded his head and then sighed, "It's fortunate that our grandfather has been in closed-door cultivation for the past few years. Otherwise, with his influence, if he were to come forward and say a word, who in the Sky-Soaring Pavilion's higher-ups would dare to say a word? That's right, I hope the old man can successfully go into closed-door cultivation this time. When the time comes, we'll be able to hold our heads up high." Southern Heaven Gate also had a face full of emotions. After the two brothers finished their discussion, Nan Qianba's gaze shifted to Yuzha. His face suddenly turned cold and he coldly snorted, "Third brother's death was all because of you. According to my original plan, I wanted to kill you to comfort third brother's soul in heaven." Hearing this, Yuzha was instantly covered in a cold sweat. All of the hairs on his body stood up. Nan Qianba's killing intent was real, these words weren't a joke. Luckily, Nan Qianba had another sentence. "However, seeing that third brother has always praised you as a disciple, I'll spare your dog life today." Scram. Yuzha hurriedly shouted, "Eldest martial uncle, please wait. This disciple has been reading ancient books in the library for the past 3 years. I know of a treasure that can help you become the strongest nascent soul expert." What a joke. He didn't hesitate to reveal the secret of the star ink stone because he coveted the Southern Heaven Gate's minor phaseless technique. Moreover, if he stayed, this eldest martial uncle would have even more benefits. How could he let go of this opportunity? Chapter 3876. In front of eldest martial uncle, this disciple wouldn't dare lie. However, this item is the same as the star ink stone, it has only appeared in ancient books. Normal people wouldn't be able to recognize it even if they saw it. Yuzha vowed. His meaning was clear. Others might not be able to recognize this item, but only he could. Nan Qianba was finally moved. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Alright, you can follow second brother for now. If I have time, I will personally teach you. In the future, do things for me well. If you have any other thoughts, you know what will happen." This disciple understands. Yuzha was immediately overjoyed. Now that he had stolen Nan Tianyong's inheritance, if he could obtain the minor phaseless godly skill of the Southern Sky Gate and Nan Tianba's personal teaching, even without the star ink stone, his future would be just around the corner. In the blink of an eye, a month passed by in the blink of an eye. The 16th round of the newcomer competition had officially begun. Damn, what is this woman thinking? Does she really want to go against me? Meng Jueguang looked at Murong Zhen's enchanting figure from afar and clenched his teeth in anger. In this month, Morong Zhen had been methodically moving up from the last cave to the top. Her intentions were self-evident. What Linny could see he could also see. However, the problem was that even though he knew what Morong Zhen was planning, he could only hold it in. This kind of feeling was really depressing. If Morong Zhen had immediately sided with Lin Yi, then for Meng Jueguang, although the situation would have been worse, he wouldn't have felt so bad. However, this suspense could be solved in today's round. Now that the newcomer competition had already been over 10 rounds, it was beginning to end. The ranking of the caves had already been determined, so there wouldn't be too many variables. First place, Lin Yi. Second place, Chao Hongkai. Third place, Xiao Ran. Fourth place, Meng Tong. Fifth, Morong Zhen. This was the current top 5 of the newcomers' cave-dwelling rankings in Blue Cloud Pavilion. As for the other strong person, Li Jingming, he did not reveal his strength at the early stage of the building foundation realm in the past dozen rounds of competition. He was originally ranked second in the cave abode competition, but he wisely chose a roundabout strategy. He took the opportunity when other newcomers challenged him to admit defeat. Not only did he push himself to the cave abode with a lower ranking, but he also successfully bypassed Morong Zhen, who was coming at him fiercely. He killed 2 birds with 1 stone. According to the current ranking, today's rookie challenge was the best round to see Morong Zhen's true intentions. The reason was simple: she had Meng Tong above her. In the previous rounds, although the rookies that Morong Zhen had challenged were nominally Meng Jueguang's subordinates, they were not the core members of Meng Jueguang's faction. However, Meng Tong was different. He was a direct disciple that Meng Jueguang had nurtured with all his might. This was where Meng Jueguang's bottom line was. It did not matter if Morong Zhen challenged other newcomers, but if she challenged Meng Tong today, it would be equivalent to declaring war with Meng Jueguang officially. From then on, in Meng Jueguang's eyes, Morong Zhen would be a sworn enemy like Lin Yi. There would be no room for negotiation. However, if Morong Zhen were to skip Meng Tong and challenge Xiao Ran, who was ranked higher than her, that would mean that she would be friendly to Meng Jueguang. In Meng Jueguang's eyes, Morong Zhen would be one of his own people that he could use. She would be friendly to Meng Jueguang. In Meng Jueguang's eyes, Morong Zhen would be one of his own people that he could use. Whether they were friends or foes, it all depended on Morong Zhen's choice today. Before the battle, Meng Tong asked Meng Jueguang nervously, "Ninth cousin, if Beauty Morong challenges me today, what should I do?" Although the Meridian heart-shattering pill was already in place, under Meng Jueguang's deliberate arrangement, Meng Tong had not taken it yet. He was still in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. Morong Zhen, on the other hand, was at the peak of the early stage of the foundation-building realm. "What do you mean, what should we do? If she dares to challenge you, it means that she's our enemy. Fight her with all your might." Meng Jueguang snorted coldly. Then he looked at Meng Tong and said suspiciously, "I heard that this slut often takes the initiative to invite people to her wooden hut to have tea. Don't tell me you're involved too?" No, definitely not." Meng Tong denied it immediately. Over the past month, not only did Morong Zhen successfully make Meng Jueguang and Lin Yi hesitant, but because her position was gradually stabilized, some of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's newcomers began to go with the flow. The most obvious example was when they accepted Morong Zhen's invitation to participate in the so-called wooden tea party at her small wooden hut. Of course, it was a very pure tea party in name. To put it bluntly, they were going to watch Morong Zhen, the slut, perform an erotic dance. Even if they could not taste any substantial sweetness, being able to see such a delightful and enchanting beauty wearing simple clothes and posing in various seductive postures was still enough to make them salivate. Moreover, the benefits of participating in Morong Zhen's tea party were not just a feast for the eyes. For the low-level Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies, there were actually substantial benefits. As it turned out, Morong Zhen had deliberately avoided the rookies who were invited to participate in the wooden tea party during the month's rookie challenge. Otherwise, she would not have been able to fight her way from the so-called 16th cave at the foot of the mountain to the 5th cave at the foot of the mountain in just a month. The 2 rookies who had skipped the challenge had actually profited. Not only could they feast their eyes at the wooden tea party, they could also lose less challenge points in the rookie challenge. Why not? However, this was not without its disadvantages. At least, when Meng Jueguang saw that Morong Zhen had deliberately let the 2 of them go, the 2 of them had already been blacklisted. Even if they did not betray her on the surface, when the time came, Meng Jueguang would definitely settle the score. This was also the reason why Morong Zhen could only entice 2 rookies in a month despite being so tempting. Although the others were also drooling under Meng Jueguang's tyranny, There were many who had evil intentions, but not many who had the guts to do so. Really? Meng Jueguang shot a glance at Meng Tong. This fellow was his most valued younger brother. If the other rookies were fence-sitters, he would at most be annoyed. However, if even Meng Tong had a problem, then as the senior steward, he would be a general without an army. Meng Jueguang did not doubt Meng Tong's loyalty, but he did not dare compliment this fellow's intelligence. If Murong Zhen casually teased him, then there might be a problem, so he had to be careful. I really didn't. I can swear an oath. Ninth cousin, you can't listen to other people's slander. Meng Tong hurriedly swore. Chapter 3877. That's good. We'll see what that woman Murong Zhen will choose later. If she knows what's good for her, there will still be a place for her in the future. However, if she's blind enough to challenge you, then there's nothing to be afraid of. Just fight her with all your might. She won't dare to kill you. Meng Jueguang snorted coldly. Okay. Meng Tong subconsciously shrank his neck. Meng Jueguang sounded very confident, but the person she was going up against was him, Meng Tong. What if this woman was unscrupulous? Wouldn't he be beaten to death? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Murong Zhen leisurely walked up to the ring. In every round of the newcomer challenge, it had become a tradition for the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion to watch this beauty go up first. There had been no exception for more than a month. Murong Zhen's pair of seductive peach blossom eyes slowly swept across everyone's faces, especially when her gaze landed on Meng Jueguang and Lin Yi. She even paused for a moment meaningfully. Only when everyone's hearts were hooked did she slowly speak. Lord Judge, Murong Zhen from cave number 5 at the foot of the mountain challenges Xiao Ran from cave number 3 at the foot of the mountain. Murong Zhen smiled charmingly. Her eyes finally fell on Xiao Ran. She even threw a seductive glance at him. As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd went into an uproar. Not only were Meng Jueguang and Lin Yi concerned about Murong Zhen's stance, but the other newcomers were also very concerned. However, they might not be able to guess the woman's intentions as early as the two of them. Skip Meng Tong and challenge Xiao Ran. Meng Jueguang immediately let out a sigh of relief. Murong Zhen's action was undoubtedly a gesture of goodwill. Although it did not mean that this woman would rely on him, through this action he could at least be sure that the person Murong Zhen wanted to deal with was Lin Yi, not him, Meng Jueguang. This woman is quite sensible. Meng Jueguang smiled complacently. Although Murong Zhen's action of stealing from him previously made him very angry, as long as Murong Zhen went to deal with Lin Yi's group, he would be a natural ally. They could be roped in and used. It's more than that. Ninth cousin brother, this beauty Murong is actually with us. Meng Tong chuckled. Now, not only did he not have to bite the bullet and fight with Murong Zhen, but he could also imagine his beautiful future. Since they were on the same side, surely Murong Zhen, that slut, wouldn't mind letting him, Meng Tong, have a taste of sweetness? Under the gazes of the crowd, Xiao Ran, who was challenged by Murong Zhen, did not seem to be surprised. He exchanged glances with Lin Yi and the others. He immediately stepped into the arena. Please advise me. Xiao Ran cupped his fists at Murong Zhen. His expression was calm and he did not panic at all. Seeing that, Murong Zhen could not help but chuckle. Brother Xiao Ran is so elegant. I didn't notice it before. Xiao Ran had always been the kind of person who did not show his strength. Even though everyone knew that he was Lin Yi's right-hand man and that his strength should not be underestimated, very few people would pay attention to him. On the contrary, people like Qiao Hongkai were more eye-catching. Ever since she came to the welcome pavilion, Murong Zhen had been observing everyone. Lin Yi was the first to be targeted, and his subordinate Xiao Ran would not be let go. However, she had always thought that this person was ordinary. Now that she stood in the arena and fought with him, she suddenly realized that this person was not simple at all. With his strength in the early stage of the foundation building realm, he was fighting against an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm. However, he was still able to maintain such a calm and collected manner. How could such a person be an ordinary person? Even if his boss, Lin Yi, were to fight him, he would not be able to do as well. She really did not understand why this guy would follow Lin Yi so easily. Brother Xiao Ran, after this, are you interested in coming to my wooden tea party? I'm willing to wait for you. Murong Zhen tempted him with her charming eyes. Everyone in the audience swallowed their saliva in envy. When Murong Zhen told them before, he did not say anything so sincere. Even the two who were brave enough to go to the meeting could only enjoy the view. It was impossible for them to make a move on Murong Zhen. However, now that Murong Zhen said that in front of everyone, Did it not mean that such a salivating flower was going to fall on Xiao Ran, the silent cow dung? Hey, if I were Xiao Ran, I'd agree to it first. It's a free advantage, don't you think so, boss? Xiao Hongkai joked with Linny. Linny could not help but laugh when he heard that. Right, my foot. This is a man-eating flower that eats people. There's no such thing as a free advantage. By the time you taste the sweetness, you'll already be a piece of meat in her mouth. It's wishful thinking to escape unscathed. TSK, what a scary woman. Xiao Hongkai shrank her neck when she heard that. She turned around and looked at the arena with anticipation. I'm very curious about how Xiao Ran, the silent and taciturn guy, will react. Maybe he's also a man who's cold on the outside. Then we'll just watch. Linny smiled. He was not worried about Murong Zhen's seduction at all. If Xiao Ran could not control himself so easily, he would not have been able to escape from the cruel competition in the secular world. Faced with Murong Zhen's undisguised seduction, which could even be called bold seduction, Xiao Ran's face actually turned red. He looked a little shy, like a little boy. Yo, brother, Xiao Ran is actually shy. How cute. Murong Zhen's eyes instantly lit up. She had been in the brothel for so many years, but she had never seen a guy among the cultivators who would blush after being casually teased. It was really too rare. Murong Zhen was not the only one who found it strange when Xiao Ran blushed. Even Lin Yi and the others who were below the stage were taken aback. They could not help but look at each other. No way. He's blushing after being casually teased. Has this guy never had a serious relationship with a woman before? He's too honest. The others, including Meng Tong, laughed wantonly. This guy can't still be a virgin, can he? This is too funny. A cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm has not even touched a woman before. He's such a failure in life. As for Meng Jueguang, he glared at the important parts of Murong Zhen's body greedily. This woman is really 100%. After a while, Xiao Ran's expression returned to normal. He said awkwardly, Miss Murong, I'm not interested in the wooden tea party. If there's nothing else, let's start as soon as possible. Chapter 3878. Initially, she wanted to tease Xiao Ran a little more. However, seeing that Xiao Ran had adjusted his expression and was unmoved, she lost interest and said, Fine. Since Xiao Ran wants to fight, I'll play with you. As soon as she finished speaking, Murong Zhen let out a charming snort, and her figure swiftly flew toward Xiao Ran. As soon as she made her move, everyone below the ring, including Meng Jueguang and Lin Yi, widened their eyes and observed her abilities. Although she had been at the Welcome Pavilion for a month and was always the first to fight in every round of the Newcomers' Challenge, due to the huge difference in abilities, every newcomer who was challenged by her, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm, would admit defeat. Therefore, nobody had seen her fight for the past month. However, Xiao Ran, whom she was facing now, was not an ordinary newcomer. As an expert in the early stage of the foundational building realm, although Murong Zhen felt pressured, it was not to the point where she would not dare to fight. With Xiao Ran's background, unless Murong Zhen was undefeatable among those in the early stage of the foundational building realm, it would not be easy for her to defeat Xiao Ran even if she was confident of winning. As soon as Murong Zhen moved, Xiao Ran moved as well. With an exquisite body technique like the shadow step, Xiao Ran was never an expert who liked to fight head-on. Xiao Ran's fighting style was to use the shadow step to deal with his opponent and look for opportunities to attack. It was because of this fighting style that he had the confidence to fight Murong Zhen, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm. If it were Xiao Hongkai who was used to fighting head-on, challenging someone who was of a higher level would be suicide. Yo, brother Xiao Ran, you have such a good body technique. Murong Zhen's eyes brightened. Because she had the advantage in terms of strength and rank, her speed was clearly faster than Xiao Ran's. In theory, Xiao Ran should not be able to escape from the palm of her hand. However, in the limited space of the arena, Xiao Ran made it impossible for her to make a move. This was all thanks to the shadow step. The speed in a straight line might not be very fast, but in such a small area, it was definitely second to none, even when compared to all the movement techniques. However, even then Xiao Ran did not dare to be careless in the slightest. This was because he had already pushed his disorienting steps to its limits. However, the most he could do was to contend with Murong Zhen. He could remain undefeated, but he would not be able to find an opportunity to attack. After all, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm was not that easy to deal with. Other than the little bit of kinship between her and Elder Murong, it was mainly because of her own strength. This woman was not as simple as a vase that looked good but was useless. With regards to this situation, Xiao Ran had long since anticipated it. If he could seize the initiative just by relying on the shadow step alone, then his opponent would be too weak. However, if this continued, the situation wouldn't be advantageous to him. The effects of the shadow step were shocking, but it also consumed a large amount of vital energy. If this continued, Xiao Ran felt that he would not be able to outlast Murong Zhen. Just as Xiao Ran was about to take the risk and wait for an opportunity to make his move, Murong Zhen, who was chasing after him, suddenly giggled. "Brother Xiao Ran, people say that a man chasing a woman is like a mountain apart. A woman chasing a man is like a mountain apart. I've been chasing after you for so long, you should at least give me a response." Flirting. Flirting again. Although Xiao Ran did not want to bother with her, his shadow steps slowed down a little. Then, his heart shuddered, and a murderous intent suddenly appeared behind him. Xiao Ran was already very careful. While he was using shadow step to evade the attacks, Xiao Ran was extremely cautious. While he was using the shadow step to deal with Murong Zhen, he was constantly paying attention to his opponent's position and movements. However, in that split second, Murong Zhen's fingertip flashed with a piercing light. She was 50 feet away just a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, she had already appeared behind Xiao Ran. Bang! Under the astonishment of everyone present, Xiao Ran directly fell out of the ring. Lin Yi and the others reacted and immediately went forward to help him up to check his injuries. They asked in concern, "Are you all right? Are you badly injured?" Before Xiao Ran could speak, Murong Zhen spoke on his behalf. She said in a tone that was half surprised and half regretful, "Of course he's all right. Brother Xiao Ran, you're the first person in the early stage of the foundation building realm to be able to dodge my phantom finger. You should be proud of yourself." Under the support of his senior brother and Xiao Hongkai, Xiao Ran slowly stood up. His expression was rather unpleasant. "Thank you for your guidance, Miss Murong. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely return the favor." He was certain that Murong Zhen did not hold back at all from that attack just now. She really did want to kill him. Her words were as sweet as honey, but when she found a chance to distract him, she immediately struck a fatal blow. This woman was just as Boss Linny had said, she had the heart of a snake and scorpion. If it were not for the fact that he was naturally alert and constantly on guard, he might not have been able to dodge that attack even if he used the shadow step. Besides, he had also used the convenience of being at the edge of the stage. If he jumped off the stage, it would be considered as him forfeiting the fight. Otherwise, even if he was lucky enough to dodge the attack, Murong Zhen would definitely have a killing move up her sleeve. "Brother Xiao Ran, you're making me really scared. Why don't we change the method? How about we go to my wooden hut next time? I'm looking forward to it." Murong Zhen's pair of seductive eyes could not stop glistening. Her adoration was clearly written on her face. It was as if she had not tried to kill Xiao Ran at all. She changed her attitude faster than flipping the pages of a book. This woman was really one of a kind. Lin Yi and the others shook their heads speechlessly. Their understanding of Murong Zhen had deepened. This woman was indeed not easy to deal with. She was not any easier to deal with than Meng Jueguang, the eldest senior brother who was in charge. Seeing that Xiao Ran was ignoring her, Murong Zhen had no choice but to give up on teasing him in boredom. She said in a coquettish voice, "Brother Xiao Ran, even though I've won, I'll leave the third cave at the foot of the mountain for you to stay. Don't forget to come to my wooden hut to play, I'll be waiting for you." After that, Murong Zhen swayed her seductive waist and leisurely walked off the stage under the greedy gaze of the crowd. "Hongkai, if nothing goes wrong, this woman will definitely challenge you in the next round. When that time comes, don't try to be brave. Just admit defeat." Lin Yi warned Xiao Hongkai with a serious expression. "That's right. This woman is really dangerous. Even though I saw her move just now, I couldn't react in time. Today I was lucky to be at the edge of the stage. Otherwise, I'd probably be a corpse by now," Xiao Ran said with lingering fear. Chapter 3879. Xiao Ran, who was more adaptable, was already in such a state. If it was Xiao Hongkai who only knew how to fight head-on, the consequences would be obvious. Judging from Murong Zhen's performance today, if she had the chance to kill anyone in Lin Yi's group, she would not hold back. This article was written by starting players. Judging from the current situation, although Murong Zhen was stronger than the other two groups in Blue Cloud Pavilion, she was still alone. On the other hand, Meng Jueguang could only rely on Meng Tong, so it would be difficult for him to improve in a short period of time. Therefore, the strongest group was still Lin Yi's group. If they could take the opportunity to get rid of Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, who were Lin Yi's two wings, it would be a good thing for both Murongzhen and Meng Jueguang. No one would let go of such an opportunity easily. Hearing Lin Yi's words, even if Qiao Hongkai wanted to put on a brave front, she could only nip it in the bud. She nodded and said, "Boss, don't worry. I treasure my life. I won't take things too hard." Hearing that, Lin Yi and the others could not help but laugh. "You dare to say that you treasure your life? Then who was the guy who almost died after fighting with Meng Tong in the previous 2 rounds?" As expected, a few days later, in the 17th round of the newcomer challenge, Murongzhen challenged Qiao Hongkai, who was in the second cave at the foot of the mountain. Due to Lin Yi's warning, although Qiao Hongkai wanted to have a good fight with this evil woman, she chose to forfeit in the end. What a smart and cute young man. This was Murongzhen's evaluation of Qiao Hongkai. This was not a polite remark, but a sincere evaluation. If Qiao Hongkai was really stubborn, even if Lin Yi had warned him beforehand, Murongzhen could still provoke him to attack first. However, reality proved that no matter how Murongzhen tried to persuade Qiao Hongkai had been very restrained from beginning to end. He had the demeanor of a great general who was as steady as a mountain. Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai, the 2 subordinates of Murongzhen, received high praise from Murongzhen. But in this way she was even more interested in Lin Yi. Although she tried to interact with Lin Yi on the first day she arrived at the welcome pavilion, she still had no idea how strong Lin Yi was. A person who could make Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai follow his orders could not be an ordinary person. 3 days later, the 18th round of the newcomer challenge began as scheduled. This was the final round of the assessment, so it naturally attracted a lot of attention. Everyone was rubbing their palms together. Looking at the previous 4 rounds of the newcomer assessment, as long as one was capable, the challenge round was undoubtedly the easiest round to grab points. The 18th round was the last chance. If they did not fight now, they would be helpless when their points were deducted during the spiritual medicine assessment. Then they would really want to cry, but no tears would come out. The intensity of this round's final round was imaginable. Other than that, there was another more important point. Murongzhen was currently in the second cave at the foot of the mountain. She had already defeated 2 of her subordinates, Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai. So, in this last round, would she challenge Lin Yi? One was an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational level. The other was the number 1 newcomer that everyone was helpless against. If these 2 were to fight, in the eyes of the newcomers at the Blue Cloud Pavilion, it would be like Mars colliding with Earth. This was a battle that could decide the future of the competition. However, Murongzhen was not a fool. Although she had already defeated Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai, it did not mean that she would take the initiative to go against Lin Yi. She was only expressing her goodwill to Meng Jueguang, but she did not completely support Meng Jueguang. However, she didn't fully support Meng Jueguang. If she were to challenge him today, Meng Jueguang would be the biggest beneficiary no matter who won. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. There was no need to explain this logic. Before this, Murongzhen did not think much of Lin Yi, who was rumored to only be in the early stage of the foundational level. However, after witnessing the potential of Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai, she changed her mind. Based on Lin Yi's strength, even if he was really in the early stage of the foundational level, he would not be easy to deal with. If she was not careful, she might fail miserably. Therefore, according to Murongzhen's initial plan, she did not plan to challenge Lin Yi today. However, what Meng Jueguang said last night made her change her mind. The higher-ups have decided that I will take over the position of the 3rd pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion soon. Whether this news is true or not, I believe with Lady Murong's connections, it will not be difficult to verify. When that time comes, the position of the new manager of the Blue Cloud Pavilion will be vacant. This sentence made Murongzhen's heart palpitate. Over the past month or so, she had found out that the reason she was sent to the Welcome Pavilion was all because of Lu Tianyu. Not only was he Su Lingchong's sworn brother, but he was also the young master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion with a powerful background. Moreover, he had spread the news of her offending Lady Shangguan to everyone, causing Murongzhen to become a street rat in the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Even Elder Murong, who was behind her, did not dare to speak up for her, let alone speak up for her. If nothing unexpected happened, her becoming a disciple of the Blue Cloud Pavilion was already a foregone conclusion. In the future, even if she entered the 3 great pavilions, she would still be a member of the Blue Cloud Pavilion and would not be able to return to the Soaring Sky Pavilion. If she wanted to stand out in the Blue Cloud Pavilion and take revenge on the Lady Shangguan laner, she could only rely on herself. As for the position of the eldest senior brother in charge of the newcomers in the Welcome Pavilion, even though it was not that important, nor did it have much power. If Morongzhen could hold the position while she was still a newcomer, it would be a very glorious and rare resume. After that, once she entered the Blue Cloud Pavilion, she would immediately be promoted to a higher rank. This kind of opportunity was almost impossible to come by. Morongzhen wanted this position, and if he were to really be promoted to the third pavilion master as Meng Jueguang had said, then he would be the previous pavilion master as well as the immediate superior. Hence, he would have a great say in the candidate for the position. Meng Jueguang could see through Morongzhen's ambition, so he proposed this condition. He recommended Morongzhen to be promoted to the position, and the price was to challenge Lin Yi. Honorable Judge, number 2 at the foot of the mountain Morongzhen, would like to challenge number 1 at the foot of the mountain Lin Yi. After Morongzhen went up the stage, she no longer acted coquettishly like she usually did. Her expression was unprecedentedly stern. In the midst of the uproar, Lin Yi raised his head in surprise. He did not believe that a woman like Morongzhen would be willing to become Meng Jueguang's subordinate. Now that she had done such a stupid thing, there must be a reason behind it. Fine, it's been a long time since I've fought with someone. It's just the right time to loosen up. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth curled into a smile. He calmly walked up the stage. Chapter 3880. Hee, this is going to be interesting. I've never seen boss with such a strong desire to fight, Xiao Hongkai said excitedly. Xiao Ran nodded in agreement. He had seen Lin Yi fight in the secular world, but he had been quiet ever since he came to Heavenly Island. Even if he did, it was just a small fight. He had never seen Lin Yi get serious. Nobody knew that although Lin Yi had been keeping a low profile ever since he came to Heavenly Island, he was not always quiet. Not only did he beat Yu Zhihaf to death, but he also blew up Nan Tianyong, a master in the late stage of the foundation building realm, to the brink of death. It was just that nobody knew he was second Lin. The bitter senior brother next to him was a little worried. Morongzhen is at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm. Junior brother Lin might be in danger. Sai, it's better to be careful. Seeing Lin Yi walk into the ring calmly, Morongzhen suddenly chuckled. Brother Lin, I've been wanting to fight with you for a long time. Now that I finally have the chance, you must go easy on me later. Lin Yi nodded. Don't worry, I will. Fuck. The crowd below the ring could not help but curse. Morongzhen was a master in the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm. She was just being polite, but Lin Yi was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm. What was he trying to act tough for? As expected of a pretentious person. He would never forget to act tough in any situation. Not only did the crowd below the ring look down on him, but even Morongzhen was surprised. Isn't his attitude and tone a little too arrogant? Morongzhen only came back to her senses after being stunned for a while. That's great. Brother Lin, you must keep your word. As soon as he finished speaking, Morongzhen's body turned into nothingness. When he reappeared in the next moment, he was less than 3 inches away from Lin Yi. His fingertip was pointed at Lin Yi's throat with blinding white light. Phantom finger. When he fought against Xiao Ran last time, Morongzhen at least managed to stall for a while. However, this time he used a killing move right away. From this, it could be seen how important Lin Yi was to him. To be honest, even if he had not made a deal with Meng Jueguang, Morongzhen himself had wanted to teach Lin Yi a lesson. Even though he had taken the initiative to seduce him, this fellow did not appreciate it at all. How could he let such a blind fellow go so easily? Women were very vengeful creatures. So fierce? Women are not to be trifled with. Lin Yi pursed his lips, pretending to be alarmed. However, he was not in a hurry. He used the butterfly subtle steps and dodged Morongzhen's surprise attack at the critical moment. Big brother Lin is indeed not simple. Her attack missed. Although Morongzhen had expected this, he was still somewhat disappointed. However, this also confirmed her speculation. Lin Yi's ability was indeed far above Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. Otherwise, if it was Xiao Ran, even if he could dodge this attack, he definitely would not have been able to do it so easily. Morongzhen saw it very clearly. Although Lin Yi's response seemed dangerous, it was completely within his control. He was able to deal with her phantom fingers so easily. This man's ability was not as simple as the early stage of the foundational building realm. It was simply unfathomable. Lin Yi smiled. Up until now, he had yet to use his true ability. Although Morongzhen's ability was not bad, she was still quite a distance away from him. Although she was not considered weak among the early stage of the foundational building realm, compared to him, she was still quite a distance away. Even if he did not use a cheating move like the Chi Bomb, Lin Yi could fight evenly with Yu Zhi, a middle-stage foundational building realm master with his own ability. He could even beat his opponent half to death. However, compared to Yu Zhi, Murongzhen was obviously weaker. Murongzhen could not help but let out a cold snort when he saw that. At the same time, she was secretly annoyed. She completely stopped looking down on him. Looking at the situation before her, it was obvious that Lin Yi, who was in the early stage of the foundational building realm, was looking down on her, who was in the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm. Brother Lin, do you know why my move is called Phantom Finger? Murongzhen suddenly giggled. Phantom Finger? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. Her move was fast, and the blinding white light did have the effect of confusing people. However, it did not seem to match the word phantom. Just as Lin Yi and the crowd below the ring were waiting for an explanation, Murongzhen suddenly moved. At first glance, her move looked exactly the same as before. However, that was only in the eyes of the spectators below the ring. From Lin Yi's point of view, it was a completely different feeling. The phantom finger just now was merely a flash of white light. However, in Lin Yi's eyes, there were dozens of white lights coming from all directions at the same time. There was no way for him to dodge. Visual deception? Lin Yi reacted immediately. She was using visual deception to create the so-called phantom effect so that people could not defend against it? However, wasn't this a little too much? At a lower level, this kind of move was indeed brilliant and impossible to defend against. However, for cultivators above the foundational level, even if they closed their eyes and did not use their sight, they could still rely on their superhuman senses to fight. There was no doubt that Lin Yi's senses were sharp. However, when he closed his eyes, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. Because when he closed his eyes, the dozens of white lights were still in his brain. Did you think my phantom finger was only deceiving your eyes? Brother Lin, you are too childish. Seeing this, Murongzhen laughed coldly. If it was such a low-level martial arts technique, how could it be her signature move? Phantom finger did not simply deceive one's sight. What it deceived was one's divine sense. At the foundational level, it was difficult to rely on basic senses such as sight and hearing to control a battle. What cultivators relied on the most was divine sense. The core of the phantom finger that Murongzhen cultivated was to deceive divine sense. For most cultivators, once their divine sense could not distinguish the real from the fake, they would be at a loss. The speed was extremely fast, but it was difficult to tell the real from the fake. The phantom finger was a powerful martial arts technique that focused all the chi into one point to create explosive damage. Murongzhen's target was usually the throat, which was a fatal point. Individually, these points were not too difficult to deal with. However, if they were combined, even a peak early-stage foundational cultivator would be under a lot of pressure. Interesting. Is this woman finally going all out? Lin Yi can only wait for his death. Meng Jueguang's eyes brightened as he watched. From other people's perspective, Murongzhen's move was no different from the first test. The only person who had been deceived was Lin Yi, who was on the stage. However, Meng Jueguang had heard of the phantom finger technique before. Chapter 3881. If he couldn't tell which one was real, he couldn't dodge it. If he couldn't dodge, he could only fight it head-on. Even if he could guess the direction of the phantom finger's attack, how could he block it head-on? Other than deceiving the divine sense, the phantom finger's other specialty was that it was good at breaking through the opponent's defense. If he fought it head-on, even an expert of the same level would be afraid. Moreover, Lin Yi's ability was much weaker than Murongzhen's. Although Meng Jueguang tempted Murongzhen to challenge Lin Yi and imagined Murongzhen killing Lin Yi in the ring, when the moment finally came, he suddenly felt that it was unreal. This wonderful feeling was like a dream. Unfortunately, Meng Jueguang's dream was destined to not come true. Deceiving the divine sense is indeed a brilliant technique, but in the face of absolute power, what use is it? Lin Yi put his fists in front of his throat without a change in expression. His entire body exploded with a scorching heat, giving people the feeling that they'd fallen into a sea of fire in an instant. Although Lin Yi had no way of determining which white light was the real phantom finger, he was sure that Murongzhen had locked onto his throat. Therefore, no matter which direction the attack came from, the final target would definitely be his throat. Then things would be simple. All he had to do was protect his throat and wait for an opportunity to counterattack. Murongzhen was shocked by the heat on Lin Yi's body. It was rare to see such a domineering fist intent. Even if Lin Yi didn't release it, the heat on the ring was enough to make people breathless. If Murongzhen didn't use her true chi to suppress it, the clothes on her body would have burned to ashes. However, when she saw Lin Yi's action of protecting his throat, she immediately sneered. If he could block the phantom finger by simply protecting his throat, then what was the point of this beauty? Murong Zhen's thoughts moved, and the phantom finger's target instantly changed to Lin Yi's chest. There are so many vital points on the human body, and the throat isn't the only one. With her mastery of the phantom finger, even if she wanted to change it at the last moment, it would be a piece of cake. However, Murong Zhen soon realized that he was wrong. Not only was he wrong, but he was ridiculously wrong. Lin Yi was waiting for the moment she changed her target. No technique was perfect, and no matter how good the phantom finger was, it was impossible for it to be flawless. Sometimes, it would also reveal a flaw, such as the moment when she changed her target. Among the dozens of white lights, there was one that was clearly more responsive than the others. Although the difference was negligible and it was difficult for an ordinary cultivator to detect it, Lin Yi could. 23rd style of Frenzy Fist. 2 consecutive shots. After this period of concentrated cultivation, Lin Yi had completely grasped the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Even if it was a powerful martial skill like the 23 styles of the Frenzy Fist, he could still execute it twice in a row. His fist met the phantom finger. The other punch was aimed at Murong Zhen's face. Boom. The illusory finger and the frenzied fire fist's raging fist intent clashed head-on. Indeed, it was as Lin Yi had expected. Even though the frenzied fire fist was a tough and tyrannical martial technique, it was not able to withstand the frenzied fire fist's attack. It was also very difficult to gain any advantage. After the collision, the 23rd style of the frenzy fist was actually penetrated and stabbed into Lin Yi's chest. Fortunately, Lin Yi had a strong protective layer of vital energy. Moreover, after colliding with the frenzied fire fist, phantom finger was already an arrow at the end of its flight. However, the injuries on Lin Yi's body were merely flesh wounds. They did not injure any vital parts at all. On the other hand, Murong Zhen was not having such a good time. She never thought that Lin Yi would dare to divert his attention to deal with her while dealing with her phantom finger. He actually had the strength to deal with her. It was simply unimaginable. Caught off guard, the fiery fist intent of the wildfire fist surged toward her. Murong Zhen's beautiful face immediately turned pale. It was important to know that the phantom finger had consumed most of her true qi, and she was in an awkward state of having no energy left. Ah! In a panic, Murong Zhen, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm, screamed in fear. She was at a loss for what to do, so she used the phantom finger again at the cost of suffering internal injuries. Unfortunately, the phantom finger was indeed powerful when it was used to attack. However, it was not enough when it was used to defend. The characteristic of using a single point to break the surface was completely useless in a situation like this. The phantom finger could only break the strongest point of the frenzied fire fist, but it could not block the rest of the attack at all. Bang! Murong Zhen's entire body was instantly enveloped by the fiery fist intent of the frenzied fire fist. It was not enough to seriously injure or kill her, but it definitely did not feel good either. At the very least, Murong Zhen's current appearance was extremely embarrassing. Not only was her hair and face unkempt from the fire, but her exposed skin was also charred. Even her thin clothes were burned into tatters, revealing her alluring body. The crowd below the stage gulped. Initially, the crowd was on Murong Zhen's side. However, after enjoying the feast for their eyes, they secretly praised Lin Yi for doing a great job. If it wasn't for the perverted Lin Yi who helped them burn their clothes, they would not have had the chance to admire Murong Zhen's beautiful body. She was indeed a little embarrassed, but there was a rare charm to her. However, Murong Zhen, who was on the stage, had a stomach full of anger. She wore such thin clothes on the stage, so she did not mind the people below the stage taking a look at her. In reality, she actually enjoyed the feeling because it could attract the crowd's attention. It would make them unable to control themselves and prostrate themselves before her. However, she never thought that she would be so embarrassed by Lin Yi. After all, she had challenged Lin Yi today not only to make a deal with Meng Jueguang, but also to vent her anger. Who asked Lin Yi to ignore her and seduce Murong Zhen. In the end, not only did she fail to vent her anger, she ended up in such a sorry state. She had embarrassed herself so much. How was she going to stand in front of the people below the stage in the future? Lin Yi, go. Murong Zhen did not care about the awkwardness of being exposed. She gritted her teeth and was about to attack Lin Yi again. She only looked like she was in a sorry state, but she might not actually be seriously injured. At least in her opinion, she still had the strength to fight. She could not tolerate what had happened today. However, before she could finish her sentence, Lin Yi's silhouette suddenly appeared in front of her. Without a word he raised his palm. Slap. Chapter 3882. Tisk tsk. What a mess. Lin Yi said nonchalantly as he stood in the ring. It felt like he was just a bystander. A mere slap sent a powerhouse at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building stage flying? What kind of bullshit plot was that? The crowd took a long time to come back to their senses. Even Meng Jueguang's jaw dropped as if he had just seen a ghost. He could not close his mouth for a long time. To their knowledge, Lin Yi was only a powerhouse at the early stage of the foundation building stage. No matter how powerful he was, there was no way he could be more powerful than Murong Zhen, a powerhouse at the peak of the foundation building stage. In Meng Jueguang's expectation, Lin Yi would be lucky if he could survive today. Even if he could not, he would at least pay the price of being heavily injured. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. Not only did Lin Yi not die in Murong Zhen's hands, but Murong Zhen, whom he had high hopes for, was slapped off the ring. How embarrassing was that? On the other hand, on Lin Yi's side, he only suffered a flesh wound on his chest. Looking at how nonchalant he was, it could not even be considered a minor injury. At most it was just a scratch. Boss is mighty. Xiao Hongkai could not help but compliment loudly as she watched Lin Yi walk off the ring so casually. Beside her, senior brother Xiao Qiao and Xiao Ran were overjoyed too. Although they were confident in Lin Yi's abilities, they never thought he could win so easily. He casually slapped his opponent off the ring. It was unbelievable. Boss Lin Yi's abilities were ridiculously powerful. Lin Yi smiled and turned to Murong Zhen, who was still in a daze. Ms. Murong, thank you for letting me win. I'm sorry for ruining your clothes. However, if you fight me again, I advise you to wear something that's fireproof. Gasp. It was only then that Murong Zhen came back to his senses with a gasp. When he saw Lin Yi's calm yet terrifying gaze, he could not help but shudder. He clenched his teeth and clenched his fists. However, he didn't dare to utter a single word. In that instant, Lin Yi's strength had been deeply imprinted in her mind. Just thinking about it made her tremble. Towards Lin Yi, she unconsciously felt a fear that even she herself didn't notice. A dignified expert at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment was actually slapped out of the arena by a fellow who claimed to be in the early stage of foundation establishment. Ever since she was young, Murong Zhen had never even heard of such a thing, let alone encountered it. Previously she had thought that Lin Yi was only slightly more powerful. It was no big deal at all. But now, after experiencing that frightening slap, the trembling that came from the depths of her soul told her that no matter how unwilling and unconvinced she was, Lin Yi was a person she could not afford to offend. Just how powerful is this guy? Murong Zhen was already screaming in her heart. If anyone dared to tell her that Lin Yi was only in the early stage of foundation establishment, she would definitely twist that person's head off and use it as a urinal. She would then slap herself off the arena. Was he really in the early stage of foundation establishment? This guy was at least an expert at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, or even stronger. Otherwise, there was no way he could have done that. Murong Zhen's gaze toward him was now filled with a hint of fear. Lin Yi knew that he had achieved his goal today. He smiled and walked back to his senior brothers. Since he was able to slap Murong Zhen just now, naturally he could kill her. However, it was not the right time to kill her. If he defeated Murong Zhen, nobody would notice. However, it would be different if he killed Murong Zhen. Although there were more fights in the welcoming pavilion, there weren't many deaths. If the Southern Sky Gate noticed it and became suspicious, it would not be worth it. The battle today was not only a warning to Murong Zhen, but it was also a warning to Meng Jueguang and the others. He did not expect them to give up, but at least he could scare them for a while, which would save him a lot of unnecessary trouble. As for his strength at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, it was only a matter of time before it was exposed. After all, after more than a month of observation, Lin Yi was sure that the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha had shifted their attention away from him. Therefore, even if he were to reveal his strength at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, it would not be a problem. Fuck me. What kind of monster is this kid? Did he take the wrong medicine? Otherwise, how could his strength improve so quickly? Meng Jueguang was shocked when he sensed the powerful aura emitting from Lin Yi's body from afar. Even though he was close to breaking through to the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm, he was only at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. In other words, Lin Yi, a newcomer from the mortal world, who had only been in the welcoming pavilion for less than 4 months, was already on par with him, the eldest senior brother in charge? That's impossible. Meng Jueguang subconsciously eliminated the possibility. If Lin Yi's success in building his foundation was due to the foundation building pill, it was still acceptable. However, he had only built his foundation for 2 months, yet he had already reached the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. That was completely unheard of. It must be the limit of the golden core. Meng Jueguang immediately came up with a more acceptable explanation. The limit of the golden core allowed a cultivator to unleash a power that surpassed their cultivation level for a short period of time. Even if the cultivator had reached the foundation establishment realm, the effect would not be weakened. As long as the cultivator was below the foundation establishment realm, it would be effective. Lin Yi must have predicted that Murong Zhen would challenge him today, so he had prepared the limit of the golden core in advance. It was even possible that he had consumed 2 golden cores in a row regardless of the cost. That was why he could defeat Murong Zhen in the arena. Right? That makes sense. Meng Jueguang's mood improved a lot. Otherwise, if Lin Yi really became an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, he would really be in trouble. It was no longer a question of whether or not he could defeat Lin Yi. In less than 4 months after entering the welcoming pavilion, Lin Yi had advanced from the peak of the heaven stage all the way to the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Such a genius was enough to attract the attention of all the higher-ups in the Blue Cloud Pavilion. One should know that Lin Yi was not like Murong Zhen. He was born in the secular world, a real grassroots newcomer. Every breakthrough he made was proof of his talent and cultivation. If Lin Yi could maintain such a miraculous performance, it would not be a problem for him to have a meteoric rise in the future. If he had a little more opportunity, it was very likely that he would become a future leader of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, like Ramjia of the Soaring Pavilion. That was not something that Meng Jueguang could deal with. Even if he became the 3rd pavilion head of the Welcoming Pavilion, it would be useless. Chapter 3883. While Meng Jueguang was deceiving himself and others, Murong Zhen, who had been humiliated in front of everyone, looked at Lin Yi suspiciously. Then she quietly got up and walked back to her cabin. This time Lin Yi had given her a solid lesson. No matter how much hatred she bore in her heart, at least for now, she didn't dare to provoke Lin Yi so easily. Seeing that Murong Zhen was about to leave, Xiao Hongkai could not help but want to jump out and challenge her. He was not a gentleman and he did not know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. Previously, when he was forced to admit defeat, he was filled with anger. Now that he had a chance to get back at her, he would not let it go easily. However, he was stopped by Lin Yi. It was not that Lin Yi was soft-hearted and wanted to let this woman go. He knew that in the battle just now, he did not use up all of Murong Zhen's vital energy, nor did he injure her severely. He only made her leave the stage. If Xiao Hongkai were to challenge her now, the result would still be disastrous, so he might as well be generous. Since Lin Yi had spoken, Xiao Hongkai naturally would not disobey. However, it was already the last round of the newcomer challenge. Apart from Murong Zhen, he only had his own boss, Lin Yi. There was no way for him to challenge anyone, so he was itching to fight. After a while, Xiao Hongkai's gaze finally fell on Meng Tong and he provoked, "Newcomer Meng, since we have nothing to do, why don't we fight? This is the last round. My ranking is higher than yours, so I can't take the initiative to challenge you. But don't tell me you're also holding back and don't dare to challenge me? Or are you afraid of being beaten up by me in the last 2 rounds?" As soon as he said this, the audience, who were still immersed in the shock of Lin Yi slapping Murong Zhen, suddenly became interested again. Lin Yi had just finished beating up Murong Zhen, and Xiao Hongkai immediately went to provoke Meng Tong. Today was indeed the last round of the newcomer challenge competition. It was so exciting. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the lumber waist, whom he looked down upon, provoked him. With his bad temper, Meng Tong could not tolerate it. "Fuck you. If it was Lin Yi who said this, then it would be fine. But you're just a useless subordinate and you dare to provoke me? Who the hell do you think you are? You want me to challenge you, right? Fine, I'll fulfill your wish. Today I'll let you die knowing." Not waiting for Meng Jueguang to speak, Meng Tong took the initiative to jump into the arena, sneering at Xiao Hongkai and beckoning with his finger. If not for Murong Zhen, according to Meng Jueguang's original plan, he planned to let him consume the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill to increase his strength to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, then he would challenge Lin Yi. But now, because of Murong Zhen, Meng Tong was not in a hurry. After all, if Murong Zhen fought against Lin Yi first, he would not lose anything, so his strength was still at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. If the one who provoked him was Lin Yi, then Meng Tong would not have the confidence to go into the arena. Meng Tong really didn't have the confidence to go on stage. However, the other party was just trash chow. You were lucky enough to survive the previous 2 times, so why are you so arrogant? Every time I provoke him, he wins. This guy is really an obedient idiot. Xiao Hongkai smiled, rolled up her sleeves and walked into the arena. The crowd was boiling. Every time these 2 guys fought, it was bloody and tragic. Today was really a good show. If you have any last words, leave them quickly. Otherwise, people will say that I'm inhumane. I'll kill you later and people will say that I don't even allow people to leave their last words. Meng Tong sneered disdainfully. He had not consumed the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill yet. But in the past, Meng Jueguang specially gave him a lot of supplementary pills to nourish his body so that he could withstand the powerful medicinal power of the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill. So even if Meng Tong was not the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, his condition was better than ever. He had no chance of winning against Lin Yi, but if it was just a mere lumber waste he did not care at all. However, Xiao Hongkai looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. Why don't you leave some for yourself? You were beaten like a dead dog 2 times in a row. I'm curious where you get your confidence from. Looking at your expression, did you take some medicine or did you take the wrong medicine? Sharp-tongued. Meng Tong snorted coldly and attacked angrily. He had always put himself on the same level as Lin Yi. Naturally, he would not waste his breath on a small fry like Xiao Hongkai. Even though both of them were injured twice, Xiao Hongkai was still not worthy of his attention. Feeling the strength of Meng Tong's leg, Xiao Hongkai was slightly stunned. It's a little stronger than before. But I haven't rested for the past 2 months. Bang, bang, bang. A series of muffled sounds of fists and kicks landing on flesh could be heard. The fight between Xiao Hongkai and Meng Tong was as brutal and bloody as ever. They were too familiar with each other. There were no tricks, it was purely a head-on fight. Half an hour later, in front of everyone's shocked eyes, Meng Tong was thrown out of the arena by Xiao Hongkai like a dead dog. Although he was in such a miserable state that he could barely stand, there was no doubt that Xiao Hongkai had won this time. Motherfucker. Meng Jueguang's eyes were wide open. When Meng Tong was provoked into going up the arena, he had already sensed that something was wrong. However, Meng Tong's brain was full of paste. Before he could stop him, Meng Tong had already fallen into the trap and went up the arena. Now, more than a month's worth of elixirs had been wasted. If he wanted to let Meng Tong take the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill, he would have to start from scratch again. This guy was a fucking useless fool. However, seeing that Xiao Hongkai could barely win against Meng Tong, this made Meng Jueguang even more certain that Lin Yi and his gang must have taken the extreme golden pill. Not only did Lin Yi use it, even Xiao Hongkai must have used it. Otherwise, with his huge disadvantage in martial arts, it was impossible for him to defeat Meng Tong at his peak condition. Unbeknownst to him, his victory over Meng Tong was the result of Xiao Hongkai's 2 months of hard work. Heaven rewarded the diligent. Not everyone could be like Xiao Hongkai, spending 24 hours a day on cultivation. First, there was the pinnacle battle between Lin Yi and Murongzhen. Then there was the tragic battle between Xiao Hongkai and Meng Tong. With these 2 powerhouses taking the lead, the other rookies were also influenced. They seized the last chance to challenge as though they were on stimulants. Even Cha Wu, who had nominally fallen into Cave Abode 16 at the foot of the mountain, mustered his courage to make one last attempt. Of course, Cha Wu's title of being a weakling among Blue Cloud Pavilion's rookies was confirmed in the end. He was defeated without any suspense. When the final round of the challenge ended, other than 2 or 3 people, all the other rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion were injured. A few of them had serious injuries that were in no way inferior to Meng Tong's. It was obvious how tragic it was. Chapter 3884. In Lin Yi's group, other than Lin Yi, who was confined to Cave Abode number 1 at the foot of the mountain, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai had earned a lot of challenge points, especially Xiao Hongkai. Although she had been entangled with Meng Tong, she had earned a total of 96 points from beginning to end, which was the highest among the rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion. Xiao Ran did well too, earning 75 points. As for Lin Yi, he only had 2 chances to fight in the past 2 months. The first time was against Cha Wu, and the second time was against Murongzhen today. He had earned a total of 18 points. As for the smug Meng Tong, he had only earned 54 points because of Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai's sudden rise. He did not even achieve half of his expectations. He did not even achieve the minimum goal of overtaking Lin Yi. It was a complete failure. Ignoring the spiritual medicine test that had yet to be completed, the rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion were ranked first with 138 points, tied for first place with Xiao Hongkai and Lin Yi with 138 points. Meng Tong was ranked third with 126 points. Xiao Ran was ranked fourth with 118 points. Li Jingming was ranked fifth with 73 points. This result was out of everyone's expectations. No one had expected that Xiao Hongkai, who was known as Trash, would suddenly emerge as a well-deserved dark horse and sit on the throne of first place. It was so dazzling that it blinded everyone's eyes. Looking at the ranking, Meng Jueguang's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. The rumors had already revealed that as long as he could break through to the mid-stage of Foundation establishment in the near future, becoming the third Pavilion Master of Welcome Pavilion would be a foregone conclusion. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but the point ranking in front of him was a slap to his face no matter how he looked at it. He had spent a large amount of resources, but the newcomer under him couldn't even get second place. How could he call himself the third Pavilion Master in the future? Just as Meng Jueguang was filled with anger, someone suddenly delivered an exquisite invitation card. Looking at the name of the person on it, Meng Jueguang was stunned. Meng Jueguang's eyes lit up. Early the next morning, someone triggered the cave abode's restriction. When Lin Yi saw the person in front of him, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. This time, the person who came was actually Blue Cloud Pavilion's publicly acknowledged weakling, Cha Wu. "Why are you looking for me?" Lin Yi looked Cha Wu up and down in surprise. Because Cha Wu stood up to challenge him in the first round of the challenge, he had a deep impression of this weakling. He was weak and liked to speculate, but he didn't have much wisdom. He only had that little bit of cleverness and he wouldn't amount to anything in the future. This was the impression that Cha Wu had left on Lin Yi. According to Lin Yi's understanding, this fellow was considered one of the earlier batch of people to rely on Meng Jueguang. However, he had never been treated well and his current situation was very bleak. His pitiful rookie assessment points were almost in the negative. Why would such a fellow come to look for him? After seeing Lin Yi, Cha Wu had a flattering smile on his face. "Boss Lin Yi, I'm really sorry for disturbing your cultivation. I'm really sorry to disturb your cultivation, but I have a piece of news that you might be interested in, so I wanted to report it to you." "What news?" Lin Yi's expression didn't change. In his heart, however, he understood a little. Could it be that this fellow couldn't stay on Meng Jueguang's side anymore, so he wanted to defect and become a spy like Li Jingming? With Cha Wu's opportunistic nature, it was very possible. After all, with his current situation, if he continued to blindly follow behind Meng Jueguang, he was destined to never be able to stand out. On the contrary, if Lin Yi's side could accept him. Although he might not receive much attention, the key was that Lin Yi had few subordinates. Even if he couldn't get the meat, he would still be able to get some soup to drink. Moreover, there was an old saying that went, 1,000 gold to buy a horse's bones. As long as Lin Yi had the slightest bit of ambition, he would definitely not be too shabby to Cha Wu, who was a pioneer. In fact, not only could he not be shabby, but he had to treat him well. Only then could he attract more people to switch to his side. However, once this matter was exposed, Meng Jueguang's side would definitely not let him go. Cha Wu definitely didn't have the guts to do so. He probably wanted to be a spy to deliver information. As long as he was a little more careful, he would be able to get some benefits without too much risk. What surprised Lin Yi, however, was the fact that someone like Cha Wu couldn't possibly get any valuable information from him, could he? Cha Wu carefully looked left and right. When he saw that there was no one around, he moved in front of Lin Yi and whispered, "Boss Lin Yi, last night I saw Meng Jueguang sneak into the small wooden house. He only left quietly this morning when the sky was about to brighten. I don't think I need to say more about what happened inside." "Really?" Lin Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. "Absolutely. I kept my eyes on the small wooden house last night. If there is even half a lie, I will be struck by lightning." Cha Wu hurriedly swore. When Lin Yi heard this, he gave him a strange look. This fellow really had nothing better to do. Why was he staring at the small wooden house instead of cultivating? His intentions were obvious. He probably wanted to take advantage of Murong Zhen, but he didn't have the guts or the strength to do so. He could only peep every day to satisfy his dirty thoughts. It was not an injustice that this fellow would become the weakling at the bottom of all the rookies. He only had himself to blame. Cha Wu blushed when he was stared at by Lin Yi. He shrunk his neck weakly before he heard Lin Yi say, "Other than this, is there anything else? If there isn't, then forgive me for not sending you off." "All right. Boss Lin Yi, then this lowly one will take his leave first. Cha Wu could only turn around and leave in disappointment. He thought that since he had taken the initiative to provide this information to Lin Yi would at least show some appreciation. In the end, he did not gain anything and came here for nothing. Lin Yi looked at Cha Wu's back and shook his head with a smile. This Cha Wu was really thinking too much if he wanted to rely on such information to gain recognition. Indeed, he only had petty tricks and could not be put on the table. However, the information provided by Cha Wu was still very valuable to Lin Yi. Although Murong Zhen was an out-and-out coquettish woman, there had never been a precedent of her staying overnight after she came here. Even the so-called tea party in the wooden house was only a feast for the eyes. It did not have any substantial benefits. However, Meng Jueguang was actually able to stay overnight in the wooden house. With Murong Zhen's coquettish nature, it was obvious what would happen if a man and woman were to be alone in a room. And the background of this matter was the final battle of the rookie challenge yesterday. Murong Zhen had been slapped off the stage by Lin Yi. On the other side, Meng Tong had been beaten half to death by Qiao Hongkai. Putting everything together, the conclusion was very obvious. This woman, Murong Zhen, was prepared to get involved with Meng Jueguang and hug each other for warmth. From the separation of the three kingdoms to the alliance of Wu against Wei? Lin Yi had expected this, but he did not expect the two to react so quickly. They had already gotten together last night. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.